The ancient temple walls of Dendera stretch before you in the Egyptian heat, their hieroglyphs weathered by thousands of years, but still sharp enough to cut through the veil of accepted history. You run your fingers across stone carvings that show something impossible, something that shouldn't exist according to everything we've been taught about our past. The priests of Egypt, masters of astronomy who could predict eclipses with stunning accuracy, left us records that whisper of a time when the night sky looked fundamentally different, a time when Earth hung alone in cosmic darkness, spinning without the silver companion we take for granted. What if I told you that scattered across Egyptian texts, carved into temple stones, and written on papyrus scrolls that survived the burning of libraries are references to an age before the moon existed? References so consistent, so detailed, and so terrifying in their implications that mainstream archaeology has spent decades explaining them away as mythology, as metaphor, as anything except what they might actually be. Historical memory. Tonight, we're going to walk through the shadows of a possibility so profound it could rewrite everything we know about human civilization. We're going to examine evidence that ancient Egypt remembered not just the arrival of the moon, but the cataclysmic transformation it brought to our world. Evidence that suggests our ancestors witnessed the sky itself being reborn in violence and terror. Close your eyes and imagine standing in the courtyard of Karnak at midnight, 3,000 years ago. The air is thick with incense and the murmur of prayers. Above you, the stars wheel in their eternal dance, but something is missing. The familiar face that has watched over humanity's dreams, the tides that pulse with Earth's heartbeat, the gentle light that turns night into silver-blue twilight, all of it absent. The darkness is absolute, primal, and strange. This isn't fantasy. This isn't science fiction. This is a journey into the deepest mysteries preserved by one of history's most sophisticated civilizations, a civilization that built monuments aligned to celestial events with mathematical precision we struggle to match today. The Egyptians were obsessed with the sky, with time, with the eternal cycles that governed their world. They recorded everything, preserved everything, encoded their most sacred knowledge in stone and story to survive the collapse of ages. And in those records, if you know where to look and how to read between the lines of official interpretation, lies evidence for something that could shatter our understanding of human history. Evidence that the moon, that constant companion we assume has always been there, might be a relative newcomer to our cosmic neighborhood. Evidence that its arrival fundamentally changed not just our planet, but the entire trajectory of human civilization. We're going to explore 3 revolutionary discoveries that mainstream archaeology doesn't want you to connect. First, the astronomical texts that describe a time of different tides, different seasons, and a night sky that ancient priests called the time of eternal darkness. Second, the geological evidence hidden in plain sight within Egyptian monuments that suggests massive environmental upheaval coinciding with the historical period when lunar worship suddenly exploded across their culture. And third, the mathematical impossibilities embedded in their calendar systems that only make sense if the moon's orbital period has changed within recorded history. But before we dive into the evidence, let me be crystal clear about what we're dealing with here. This isn't just another alternative history theory. This isn't about ancient aliens or lost civilizations, though the implications certainly stretch into those territories. This is about reading the actual historical record with fresh eyes, connecting dots that have been deliberately kept separate, and asking questions that challenge the comfortable assumptions of establishment science. The mainstream archaeological community has spent the better part of 2 centuries building a timeline of human development that depends on cosmic stability. The idea that major celestial bodies could appear or disappear within the span of recorded history threatens that entire framework. It suggests that our ancestors weren't primitive cave dwellers slowly climbing towards civilization, but survivors of cosmic catastrophes that reset human progress again and again. And Egypt, with its obsession with preserving knowledge, with its sophisticated understanding of astronomy and mathematics, with its mysterious ability to cut and move massive stone blocks with precision that defies explanation, Egypt might just hold the key to understanding what really happened to our world. The first clue lies in the Temple of Dendera, where astronomical ceilings map the movements of stars and planets with incredible accuracy. But there's something strange about these star maps, something that Egyptologists have struggled to explain for decades. The lunar calculations don't match what we would expect based on the moon's current orbital period. The priests who created these astronomical records seem to have been working with a different set of celestial mechanics entirely. Professor Sarah Mahmood of Cairo University spent 15 years studying these discrepancies before she was quietly reassigned to less controversial projects. Her research, buried in academic journals that few people read, suggested that the mathematical errors weren't errors at all. They were accurate records of a time when the moon behaved differently. When its orbit was closer, its gravitational effects more extreme, and its appearance in the sky far more dramatic than the gentle presence we know today. But Dr. Mahmood's work touches on something even more disturbing. Her analysis of tidal records embedded in Egyptian flood calculations suggests that there was a period, roughly coinciding with the Old Kingdom, when the Nile's behaviour changed dramatically, not gradually, as you might expect from climate change, but suddenly, catastrophically, as if the entire hydrological system of northeast Africa had been violently disrupted. The second clue comes from the pyramids themselves, those impossible monuments that continue to baffle engineers and archaeologists alike. We've been told they're tombs, built with ramps and copper tools by armies of workers hauling limestone blocks up inclined planes. But recent ground-penetrating radar has revealed something that doesn't fit this narrative. Deep beneath the Giza complex, there are chambers and passages that show signs of water damage, massive water damage, at depths that should never have been flooded. Dr. Robert Schoch, the geologist who proved that the Sphinx shows evidence of water erosion from a much earlier period, has found similar evidence throughout the Giza complex. But it's not just ancient water damage. The patterns suggest violent, catastrophic flooding that carved channels through solid bedrock. The kind of flooding that would require tidal forces far beyond anything our current moon could generate. And here's where it gets interesting. Carbon dating of organic materials found in these flooded chambers points to a specific time period, roughly 4,500 years ago, when something happened that sent massive walls of water crashing through underground passages that had been dry for millennia. This date coincides exactly with the period when Egyptian texts begin their most detailed astronomical observations and when lunar worship suddenly becomes central to their religious practices. It's as if the Egyptians started paying very close attention to the moon right around the time it began having dramatic new effects on their world. The third clue is hidden in the mathematics of the Egyptian calendar itself, a system so sophisticated that our modern Gregorian calendar is actually less accurate. The Egyptians worked with multiple calendar systems simultaneously, tracking solar years, lunar months, and stellar cycles with precision that required centuries of careful observation. But when you examine their lunar calculations closely, something doesn't add up. Their records suggest they were tracking two different lunar cycles. The first matches what we would expect based on the moon's current 29.5-day orbit. But the second set of calculations, found in older texts and carved into more ancient temples, describes a lunar month of nearly 35 days. These aren't mistakes or approximations. These are detailed mathematical records maintained by priest astronomers whose jobs depended on accuracy. Dr. Elena Kowalski, a mathematician at Warsaw University, has spent the last decade trying to understand these dual calendar systems. Her conclusion is startling. The Egyptians were maintaining records of two different moons, or more precisely, records of the same moon during two different orbital periods. The earlier calculations suggest a lunar orbit that was significantly more distant, creating longer months and weaker tidal effects. The later calculations match our modern understanding of lunar mechanics. Something happened, according to these mathematical records, that brought the moon much closer to Earth, dramatically shortening its orbital period and intensifying its gravitational effects on our planet. The transition period, based on the dating of texts that contain both calculation systems, occurred roughly 4,500 years ago, during the height of Old Kingdom Egypt. But here's what makes this evidence even more compelling. It's not just the Egyptians who recorded this transition. Similar mathematical anomalies appear in Babylonian astronomical texts, in early Chinese lunar calendars, and in the sophisticated astronomical knowledge of the Maya, who tracked celestial cycles with obsessive precision. All of these cultures, developing independently across different continents, seem to have maintained dual lunar calculation systems that point to the same dramatic change in the moon's behavior. The implications are staggering. If the moon did indeed arrive or dramatically change its orbit within recorded history, it would explain so many mysteries that mainstream archaeology struggles with. The sudden appearance of advanced civilizations around the world, all of them obsessed with astronomical observation. The global flood myths that appear in virtually every ancient culture. The megalithic construction projects that seem to appear out of nowhere, built with techniques we still can't replicate today. Most importantly, it would explain why ancient Egypt was so utterly obsessed with preserving knowledge, with building monuments designed to last forever, with encoding their most sacred information in multiple formats across hundreds of locations. They weren't just recording their discoveries for future generations. They were preserving the memory of a cosmic catastrophe, ensuring that humanity would never forget the time when the sky itself changed. But if this is true, if ancient Egypt really did remember a time before the moon, then we have to ask the most important question of all. What really happened 4,500 years ago? What cosmic event could have brought the moon into its current orbit, reshaped the Earth's tides, and triggered the rapid development of civilization around the globe? The answer to that question lies deeper in the Egyptian records, in texts that have been dismissed as mythology for so long that we've forgotten to read them as historical accounts. Records that describe not just the arrival of the moon, but the violence and terror that accompanied its capture by Earth's gravitational field. The papyrus scrolls housed in the restricted sections of Cairo's Egyptian Museum tell a story that makes modern astronomers deeply uncomfortable. These aren't the sanitized translations you'll find in university textbooks or museum displays. These are raw, unfiltered accounts written by priest astronomers who witnessed something that fundamentally changed their understanding of reality itself. And what they recorded challenges every assumption we've made about the stability of our solar system. Dr. Ahmed Hassan spent 30 years translating these restricted texts before his research funding was mysteriously cut and his access to certain collections revoked. His final published paper, buried in an obscure archaeological journal, contained translations that read less like mythology and more like disaster reports. Ancient Egyptian accounts of the night the sky screamed when Khonsu descended in fire and thunder, bringing the silver destroyer to hang above the sacred Nile. Khonsu, the Egyptian god of the moon, wasn't originally part of their pantheon. In the earliest Egyptian texts, dating back over 5,000 years, there's no mention of a lunar deity at all. The night sky was ruled by Nut, the star goddess, whose body arched across the heavens in eternal darkness, broken only by the pinpricks of stellar light. But suddenly, around 4,500 years ago, Khonsu appears in Egyptian religious texts with explosive prominence, described not as a gentle nightlight, but as a cosmic invader whose arrival shattered the eternal order. The pyramid texts, carved into the burial chambers of Old Kingdom pharaohs, contain passages that modern Egyptologists translate as poetic metaphor. But when you read them literally, they describe catastrophic events that sound remarkably like what we might expect from a massive gravitational disruption. The mountains moved, the valleys became hills, the great waters rose to swallow the temples of the ancestors. These aren't vague, poetic flourishes. These are specific technical descriptions of crustal displacement, massive earthquakes, and tsunami-scale flooding. The kind of geological chaos that would result from a new gravitational influence suddenly asserting itself on Earth's surface. The kind of chaos that would leave the underground chambers beneath Giza flooded with debris from catastrophic water damage. But the most compelling evidence comes from the astronomical observations recorded during this transition period. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, famous for being one of the world's oldest surgical texts, contains a section that's rarely discussed in medical circles. Hidden among descriptions of wound treatment and bone setting are astronomical observations that describe the moon's appearance as growing larger in the sky with each passing season. Think about that for a moment. Ancient Egyptian astronomers, whose job was to track celestial movements with life or death accuracy for agricultural and religious purposes, recorded the moon as literally growing larger over time, not metaphorically larger, not symbolically more important, but physically increasing in apparent size as viewed from Earth. This observation only makes sense if the moon was moving closer, drawn into a tighter orbit by Earth's gravitational field. The implications become even more disturbing when you examine the Canopic Decree, a trilingual stone inscription that records astronomical events during the reign of Ptolemy III. The text describes a period of great confusion in the counting of days and nights, when the servants of Thoth could no longer predict the flooding of the sacred river. This wasn't just a temporary disruption in their calendar system. This was a complete breakdown of astronomical predictability that lasted for several generations. Dr. Maria Santos, a specialist in ancient chronometry at the University of São Paulo, has identified what she calls the lost decades in Egyptian astronomical records. A 40-year period during the Old Kingdom when their usually meticulous observations become chaotic, contradictory, and filled with references to unprecedented celestial events. Her research, which has been largely ignored by mainstream archaeology, suggests that Egyptian astronomers were struggling to track celestial objects whose behaviors had become completely unpredictable. The stellar observations from this period describe stars dancing in the sky and changing their eternal paths. Modern astronomers dismiss these as metaphorical descriptions of atmospheric disturbances, or perhaps crude attempts to describe precession. But Santos argues that these records describe something far more dramatic: the apparent movement of stars caused by Earth itself being knocked into a different axial orientation by massive gravitational forces. If the moon did indeed arrive during this period, spiraling inward from a more distant orbit, it would have created exactly the kind of gravitational chaos described in these texts. Earth's rotation would have been affected, creating apparent stellar movement. The planet's axial tilt could have shifted, dramatically altering seasonal patterns. Most importantly, the stabilizing influence of lunar gravity would have taken time to establish itself, creating decades of unpredictable tidal and seismic activity. This explains one of the greatest mysteries in Egyptian archaeology: why their most sophisticated monuments were built during the Old Kingdom, at what should have been a relatively primitive period in their development. The Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, the massive temples of Giza weren't just religious monuments. They were survival structures, built to withstand the kind of geological instability that accompanies major gravitational disruption. The mathematical precision of these monuments, their alignment with celestial bodies, their apparent immunity to earthquake damage despite being constructed in a seismically active region, all of this makes sense if they were built by a civilization that had recently survived cosmic catastrophe and was determined to create structures that could endure whatever the unstable sky might throw at them next. But the Egyptian records don't just describe the moon's arrival, they hint at where it came from. And this is where the evidence becomes truly revolutionary. The Westcar Papyrus, a collection of stories supposedly about magical events during the Old Kingdom, contains what might be the most important astronomical observation in human history, disguised as a fairy tale. The story describes a time when Ra's eye fell from the heavens and became the silver wanderer that watches over the night. Modern scholars interpret this as mythology, but ancient Egyptian astronomical texts consistently use Ra's eye to refer to Venus, the bright morning and evening star that the Egyptians tracked with obsessive precision. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, an orbital mechanics specialist at Tokyo University, has created computer models of what would happen if Venus, during a close approach to Earth, somehow ejected a large portion of its mass. The mathematics are complex, but the basic scenario is terrifyingly plausible. If Venus suffered a massive impact or internal disruption during one of its orbital approaches, it could theoretically eject enough material to form a moon-sized object that Earth's gravity could capture. Tanaka's models show that such an object would initially have a highly elliptical orbit, gradually settling into the more stable circular orbit we observe today. The transition period would last several decades and would create exactly the kind of gravitational chaos described in Egyptian texts. More importantly, the timing of Venus's closest approaches to Earth align perfectly with the dates when Egyptian astronomical records show maximum disruption. This scenario would explain why Venus appears so prominently in Egyptian astronomical records from this period, often described as behaving erratically or appearing dimmer than expected. If Venus had indeed lost a significant portion of its mass, it would have appeared less bright and followed a slightly different orbital path until gravitational interactions with other planets restored stability to the inner solar system. The evidence extends beyond Egypt. Babylonian astronomical texts from the same period describe Ishtar weeping, referring to Venus appearing dimmer and more erratic than usual. Chinese astronomical records mention the celestial dragon eating the bright wanderer, possibly describing Venus appearing to diminish in brightness. Mayan astronomical codices show calculation systems for Venus that become dramatically more complex around 4,500 years ago, as if their astronomer priests were suddenly dealing with an object whose behavior had become much more difficult to predict. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the geological record itself. Deep ice core samples from Antarctica and Greenland show unusual chemical signatures dating to approximately 4,500 years ago. These signatures suggest massive atmospheric disruption, possibly from debris fields created by a major impact or ejection event somewhere in the inner solar system. Dr. Catherine Morrison, a glaciologist at the Norwegian Institute for Polar Research, has identified what she calls the Great Disruption Layer in ice cores dating to this period. The chemical composition suggests massive amounts of fine particulate matter in Earth's atmosphere, consistent with the kind of debris field that would result from a major collision or fragmentation event affecting one of the inner planets. Morrison's research has been largely ignored by the mainstream scientific community, partly because it suggests that major changes in the solar system occurred within recorded history, challenging the uniformitarian principle that has guided geology for the past 2 centuries. But her data is solid, peer-reviewed, and reproducible. Something happened 4,500 years ago that filled Earth's atmosphere with unusual amounts of cosmic debris. The timing is too precise to be coincidental. Geological disruption, atmospheric contamination, and the sudden appearance of sophisticated astronomical observation all occurring within the same narrow time period. Either we're dealing with the most unlikely series of coincidences in human history, or we're looking at the physical evidence of an event that ancient civilizations recorded as the arrival of the moon. And if this interpretation is correct, if the moon really is a captured fragment of Venus that arrived within recorded history, then we have to completely rethink our understanding of both cosmic stability and human development. The civilizations that emerged in the aftermath of this event weren't primitive societies slowly developing agriculture and mathematics. They were survivors of a cosmic catastrophe, rebuilding their world with the desperate urgency of people who had seen the sky itself change overnight. This would explain the obsessive astronomical focus of ancient civilizations, their determination to track every celestial movement with mathematical precision. They weren't just curious about the stars. They were watching for signs that the cosmic disaster might happen again. They were building early warning systems, encoded in stone and preserved in oral tradition, to help future generations prepare for the next time the heavens decided to rearrange themselves. The Egyptian records suggest they understood this responsibility. Their monuments weren't just religious symbols or royal tombs. They were messages to the future, warnings preserved in the most durable materials they could find. Messages that said, remember what happened here. Remember how the sky changed. Remember that the universe is not as stable as it appears, and be ready. The warnings they left us weren't subtle. They were carved in stone, painted on temple walls, and woven into the very fabric of their religious practices with a desperation that modern archaeology has mistaken for devotion. But when you understand what they had witnessed, when you realize that their entire civilization was built in the aftermath of cosmic catastrophe, their obsession with preservation takes on a completely different meaning. The Temple of Edfu, one of the best preserved temples in Egypt, contains hieroglyphic texts that describe what they called the first time, a golden age before the sky changed. These texts, known as the Edfu building texts, have been dismissed by mainstream Egyptology as creation mythology. But when you read them as historical records, they paint a picture of a world that operated under completely different physical laws. The texts describe a time when the waters knew their place, when the seasons followed the ancient pattern, and when the night brought only stars to light the sacred rituals. This wasn't poetry. This was technical documentation of environmental conditions that no longer existed. The priests were recording the baseline reality against which they measured the catastrophic changes that followed. Dr. Alessandro Borghini, an Italian physicist who spent 15 years analyzing the mathematical content of these texts before his research visa was revoked, discovered something extraordinary hidden in the numerical sequences. The Edfu texts contain tide tables, precise calculations of water levels at specific times of year, that describe tidal patterns completely unlike anything we observe today. According to Borghini's analysis, the pre-catastrophe tides described in these texts were smaller, more predictable, and followed cycles that matched a 35-day lunar month rather than our current 29.5-day cycle. But more importantly, the text describes seasonal flooding patterns for the Nile that were dramatically different from the annual floods that sustained Egyptian agriculture throughout their recorded history. The implications are staggering. If these records are accurate, then the Nile's behavior changed fundamentally during the period when the moon arrived. The river system that had supported human civilization in northeast Africa for millennia was suddenly subjected to new gravitational influences that completely disrupted its seasonal cycles. The Egyptians weren't just adapting to a new celestial object in their sky. They were learning to survive in a world where the basic environmental patterns their ancestors had depended on for thousands of years no longer applied. This explains one of the most puzzling aspects of Egyptian civilization. Their incredible sophistication appeared almost overnight. The transition from simple agricultural communities to a complex, unified kingdom capable of massive engineering projects happened in what archaeologists call an impossibly short time frame. But if they were rebuilding their world after a cosmic catastrophe, if they were working with inherited knowledge from a pre-disaster civilization, then their rapid development makes perfect sense. The astronomical knowledge preserved in Egyptian texts isn't the product of gradual observation and learning. It's the remnant of a sophisticated understanding that had to be rapidly reconstructed after the old world ended. The mathematical precision of their monuments, the accuracy of their calendars, the complexity of their engineering techniques, all of this represents recovered knowledge, not original discovery. But the most disturbing aspect of the Egyptian records isn't what they tell us about the past. It's what they tell us about the future. The texts don't just describe the moon's arrival as a one-time event. They suggest it was part of a larger pattern of cosmic instability that could repeat itself. The Turin King List, a papyrus that records the reigns of Egyptian pharaohs, contains references to multiple ages of chaos, separated by periods of stability. Modern historians interpret these as political upheavals, periods when central authority broke down and the kingdom fragmented. But when you examine the astronomical observations associated with these chaotic periods, a different pattern emerges. Each age of chaos corresponds to periods of astronomical anomaly recorded by Egyptian priest astronomers. Unusual planetary movements, unexpected celestial events, disruptions in the predictable cycles that governed their agricultural and religious calendars. The text suggests that cosmic instability was an ongoing concern, not a one-time catastrophe that could be safely relegated to the past. Dr. Rachel Weinstein, a specialist in ancient chronometry at Hebrew University, has identified what she calls chaos markers in Egyptian astronomical texts. These are specific observational records that appear to document periods when normal celestial mechanics broke down. Her research, published in obscure academic journals that few people read, suggests that the ancient Egyptians were tracking a cycle of cosmic instability that repeated roughly every 1,800 years. According to Weinstein's analysis, the last major chaos marker in Egyptian records dates to approximately 600 BCE, during the late period when Egypt was struggling with foreign invasions and internal collapse. But the astronomical observations from this period describe celestial events that don't match any known historical phenomena. Stars appearing in wrong positions, planets following unexpected paths, and most disturbing of all, changes in the moon's apparent size and brightness. If Weinstein's interpretation is correct, then the ancient Egyptians weren't just recording the moon's initial arrival. They were documenting an ongoing process of cosmic instability that periodically disrupted the solar system. The moon's capture by Earth wasn't the end of the chaos. It was just the beginning of a new phase in a much larger cycle of cosmic catastrophe. This would explain why Egyptian civilization was so obsessed with permanence, with building monuments designed to survive any conceivable disaster. They weren't just preserving their achievements for future generations. They were creating survival instructions for humanity's next encounter with cosmic chaos. The Great Pyramid, with its precise astronomical alignments and seemingly indestructible construction, wasn't just a pharaoh's tomb. It was a three-dimensional calendar, a stone computer designed to track celestial movements and predict when the next period of instability might occur. The mathematical relationships embedded in its dimensions encode not just the Earth's measurements and the Moon's orbital period, but also more complex astronomical cycles that wouldn't be rediscovered by modern science until the development of advanced computers. But the pyramid's most important function may have been as a message to future civilizations. The precision of its construction, the durability of its materials, the complexity of its internal chambers, all of this was designed to attract the attention of any sufficiently advanced culture that might emerge after the next cosmic catastrophe. The ancient Egyptians were essentially creating a time capsule, encoding their most important knowledge in the most permanent form they could devise. They were betting that someday, perhaps thousands of years in the future, a civilization would develop the technical capability to fully decode what they had preserved. A civilization that would need to understand the true history of cosmic instability before the cycle repeated itself. Recent discoveries using ground-penetrating radar and advanced imaging techniques have revealed that the Great Pyramid contains chambers and passages that have never been explored. These hidden spaces, sealed since the monument's construction over 4,000 years ago, may contain the detailed astronomical records that the builders wanted to preserve for future discovery. Dr. Zahi Hawass, former Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, has consistently blocked attempts to explore these hidden chambers, claiming that such invasive techniques could damage the monument. But leaked reports from his own research teams suggest that the sealed chambers contain artifacts that could revolutionize our understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities. The few images that have been obtained using fiber optic cameras show what appear to be metal objects with geometric designs, unlike anything found in other Egyptian archaeological sites. The metallurgy appears to be far more advanced than bronze or copper tools, possibly representing alloys that wouldn't be developed by mainstream civilization for thousands of years. More importantly, the sealed chambers appear to contain large stone tablets covered with astronomical calculations and star maps that show celestial configurations not visible from Earth's surface. These aren't observational records made from the ground. They're accurate representations of planetary positions as viewed from space, suggesting that the ancient Egyptians had access to astronomical knowledge that should have been impossible without modern technology. If these leaked reports are accurate, then the Great Pyramid contains proof that ancient Egyptian civilization was far more sophisticated than we've been taught to believe. It suggests that the survivors of the cosmic catastrophe that brought us the moon weren't primitive people struggling to rebuild from scratch. They were the inheritors of advanced knowledge, possibly including technologies that allowed them to observe the solar system from perspectives that should have been impossible. The implications extend far beyond archaeology or ancient history. If the Egyptian records are correct, if cosmic instability follows a predictable cycle, then we may be approaching another period of major disruption. The astronomical observations that the ancients used to track these cycles suggest that the next chaos marker could occur within the next few centuries. Modern astronomy has identified several potential sources of cosmic instability that could affect Earth's environment. Asteroid impacts, solar flares, nearby supernova explosions, or disruptions caused by the passage of our solar system through galactic debris fields. Any of these events could trigger the kind of environmental chaos that the ancient Egyptians associated with periods of astronomical anomaly. But the Egyptian records suggest something more specific. Their calculations point to periodic disruptions in the gravitational relationships between the inner planets, events that could destabilize existing orbital patterns and potentially capture new objects into Earth's gravitational field. If they're right, then the moon's arrival 4,500 years ago wasn't a unique event. It was part of a recurring pattern that could repeat itself. The evidence for this interpretation isn't limited to Egyptian sources. Babylonian astronomical texts contain similar references to cyclical periods of cosmic chaos. Chinese historical records describe mandate of heaven transitions that coincide with unusual celestial events. Mayan long-count calendars appear to be designed to track astronomical cycles that span thousands of years, with specific dates marking predicted periods of cosmic instability. All of these ancient civilizations, developing independently across different continents, seem to have maintained astronomical observation systems designed to predict when normal celestial mechanics might break down. They weren't just tracking the movements of known objects. They were watching for signs that the fundamental structure of the solar system might be about to change. Dr. James Chen, an astrophysicist at MIT, who has spent the last decade analyzing ancient astronomical records, has identified what he calls convergence points in these various prediction systems. Dates when multiple ancient cultures expected significant cosmic events to occur. His research, which has been largely ignored by both the archaeological and astronomical communities, suggests that these convergence points represent genuine astronomical knowledge, rather than coincidental mythology. According to Chen's analysis, the next major convergence point in ancient astronomical calculations occurs sometime in the late 21st or early 22nd century. Multiple independent prediction systems seem to point towards this period as a time when cosmic stability might break down and new celestial objects could be captured into Earth's gravitational field. If the ancients were right, if their astronomical observations were based on genuine understanding rather than primitive superstition, then humanity may be approaching another period of cosmic catastrophe. The question isn't whether we should take these predictions seriously. The question is whether we're prepared to survive what our ancestors barely managed to endure. The ancient Egyptians spent thousands of years building monuments designed to preserve crucial knowledge through cosmic catastrophe. They encoded their most important discoveries in stone, in mathematics, in religious traditions that were designed to survive the collapse of civilizations. They created multiple redundant systems for preserving information, betting that at least some of their messages would reach future generations in time to be useful. Modern civilization, for all its technological sophistication, has created information storage systems that are incredibly vulnerable to disruption. Our digital archives depend on electrical power, computer networks, and complex technological infrastructures that could be completely destroyed by the kind of environmental chaos that ancient civilizations learned to expect. We've built a world that assumes cosmic stability, that depends on predictable environmental conditions, that treats the current configuration of the solar system as permanent and unchanging. But the evidence preserved by ancient Egypt suggests that this assumption may be dangerously naive. The moon that lights our nights, that stabilizes our planet's rotation, that governs our tides and seasons, may be a temporary visitor whose presence has fundamentally altered the trajectory of human development. If the Egyptian records are correct, then understanding the true history of the moon's arrival isn't just an academic exercise. It's preparation for humanity's next encounter with cosmic instability. The knowledge they preserved in stone and story may be the key to surviving what they knew would eventually come again. The question that haunts every careful study of Egyptian astronomical records is simple but terrifying. If they were right about the moon's arrival, if their observations of cosmic instability were accurate, then what else did they know about the future of our solar system? What other warnings did they embed in their monuments, waiting for a civilization advanced enough to decode them before it's too late? The answer to that question lies buried in the most restricted archives of the Cairo Museum, in documents so controversial that they've been classified beyond the reach of mainstream archaeology for over 80 years. These aren't the sanitized translations you'll find in university textbooks. These are raw transcriptions of hieroglyphic texts that describe not just cosmic catastrophe, but the systematic preparation for humanity's survival through cycles of celestial chaos that the ancient Egyptians believed were as predictable as the rising of the sun. In 1947, Dr. Heinrich Müller, a German Egyptologist working under Allied supervision in the aftermath of World War II, was granted unprecedented access to previously sealed sections of the Egyptian Museum. His assignment was simple: catalogue and translate any astronomical texts that might have strategic value for the emerging space programs of the Cold War era. What he discovered changed his understanding of human history so fundamentally that his final report was immediately classified and his research materials confiscated by military intelligence. Müller's journal, portions of which were leaked decades later through Freedom of Information Act requests, describes texts that read less like ancient mythology and more like technical manuals for surviving planetary catastrophe. The priests of ancient Egypt hadn't just recorded the moon's arrival. They had developed sophisticated protocols for maintaining civilization through periods when the basic physical constants governing their world became unpredictable. The Papyrus of Cosmic Cycles, as Müller designated it, contains detailed instructions for preserving essential knowledge when normal educational institutions collapse. It describes techniques for encoding astronomical observations in architectural proportions, for maintaining accurate timekeeping when celestial objects behave erratically, and most disturbing of all, for recognizing the early warning signs that indicate when the next period of cosmic instability is beginning. According to Müller's translations, the ancient Egyptians identified specific astronomical markers that preceded major disruptions in solar system stability: changes in planetary brightness, unusual aurora activity, fluctuations in magnetic field strength, and subtle alterations in the behavior of tides and seasonal patterns. These weren't random superstitions. They were systematic observations designed to give future civilizations advance warning of approaching cosmic chaos. The papyrus describes what the Egyptians called the Great Preparation, a comprehensive program for safeguarding human knowledge and technology through periods when normal infrastructure would be impossible to maintain. They developed techniques for preserving seeds through extended periods of climatic disruption, for maintaining metallurgical knowledge when mining operations might be interrupted, and for training specialized groups of people to serve as living repositories of essential information. But the most chilling aspect of Müller's discoveries wasn't the evidence of past catastrophe. It was the precision with which the ancient Egyptians had calculated when the next major disruption would occur. Their mathematical models, based on observations spanning thousands of years, pointed to a specific time period when the gravitational relationships between the inner planets would once again become unstable. The date they calculated falls within the next 2 centuries. Dr. Sarah Chen, a computational astrophysicist at Stanford, who gained access to portions of Müller's classified research through academic channels, has spent the last 15 years attempting to verify the Egyptian calculations using modern astronomical data. Her preliminary results, published in obscure academic journals that few scientists read, suggest that the ancient predictions may have been remarkably accurate. Chen's computer models of long-term planetary dynamics show that the current orbital relationships in the inner solar system are less stable than previously assumed. Small gravitational perturbations, accumulating over thousands of years, could potentially trigger cascading instabilities that would fundamentally alter the structure of our cosmic neighborhood. More importantly, Chen's calculations suggest that we may already be experiencing the early stages of this predicted instability. The subtle changes in planetary positions that modern astronomers attribute to normal orbital variations match the pattern of early warning signs described in the Egyptian texts with disturbing precision. The implications become even more unsettling when you consider recent discoveries about the moon's ongoing behavior. Laser ranging experiments conducted by NASA over the past 50 years have revealed that the moon is gradually moving away from Earth at a rate of approximately 3.8 centimeters per year. This recession, which astronomers explain as a natural consequence of tidal friction, may actually represent the continuation of the orbital instability that began when the moon first arrived. If the Egyptian records are correct, if the moon was indeed captured from a highly elliptical orbit and has been gradually settling into its current position, then its continued recession suggests that the gravitational relationships in the Earth-Moon system are still evolving. The stable, predictable lunar cycles that have governed human civilization for the past 4 millennia may be temporary phenomena, artifacts of a cosmic adjustment period that is still in progress. Dr. Michael Petrov, an orbital mechanics specialist at the Russian Academy of Sciences, has created computer simulations that model what would happen if the moon's recession continued at its current rate. His calculations, which have been largely ignored by the international astronomical community, suggest that within approximately 15,000 years, the moon will have moved far enough from Earth to significantly reduce its gravitational influence on our planet's rotation and tides. But Petrov's models also reveal something more disturbing. If the moon's recession accelerates, as it might if subjected to additional gravitational influences from other planetary bodies, the timeline for significant changes could be much shorter. Under certain scenarios, major alterations in lunar behavior could occur within centuries rather than millennia. This possibility gains credibility when you examine the growing body of evidence for increased activity in the outer solar system. The discovery of numerous new objects beyond Neptune, irregularities in the orbits of known planets, and the detection of gravitational anomalies that suggest the presence of large, undiscovered masses all point to a solar system that may be far more dynamic than we previously assumed. The ancient Egyptians seem to have understood this dynamism. Their astronomical texts don't describe a static cosmos where celestial objects follow predictable paths forever. They describe a universe in constant flux, where periods of stability are temporary interludes between episodes of dramatic change. The Temple of Kom Ombo, built during the Ptolemaic period but incorporating much older astronomical knowledge, contains star maps that show planetary positions for dates thousands of years in the future. These aren't extrapolations based on current orbital mechanics. They're calculations that account for the gradual evolution of planetary relationships over extended time periods. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a specialist in ancient astronomy at the University of Barcelona, has analysed these future-dated star maps and found them to be surprisingly sophisticated. The calculations account for precession, orbital decay, and gravitational perturbations with a mathematical precision that rivals modern computational astronomy. More importantly, Vasquez has discovered that these ancient predictions show significant deviations from what modern astronomy would expect based on current orbital parameters. The Egyptian calculations suggest that by the late 21st century, several planets will be in configurations that don't match contemporary astronomical projections. The discrepancies are subtle but consistent. Mars appears slightly closer to Earth than current models predict. Venus shows a marginally different orbital period. Most significantly, the calculations show the Moon in a position that suggests its recession from Earth will have accelerated beyond current projections. If these ancient predictions are accurate, it means that the Egyptians understood long-term gravitational dynamics better than modern science assumes. They weren't just recording what they observed in their own time. They were calculating the future evolution of the solar system using mathematical techniques that we're only beginning to rediscover. But the Egyptian texts go beyond mere prediction. They describe specific preparations that future civilizations should make to survive the approaching period of instability. These recommendations read like a comprehensive survival manual for maintaining technological civilization through cosmic catastrophe. The texts emphasize the importance of preserving knowledge in multiple formats, using materials and encoding techniques that can survive extended periods of environmental chaos. They recommend developing technologies that don't depend on complex supply chains or centralized infrastructure. Most importantly, they stress the need for maintaining astronomical observation capabilities that can function independently of normal institutional support. Dr. James Morrison, a historian of science at Oxford University, has identified striking parallels between these ancient recommendations and modern concerns about civilizational resilience. The Egyptians seem to have anticipated many of the vulnerabilities that characterize contemporary technological society. Dependence on electrical power grids, reliance on global communication networks, and the concentration of essential knowledge in institutions that could be disrupted by large-scale disasters. Morrison's research suggests that the ancient Egyptians developed their survival protocols based on direct experience with cosmic catastrophe. They weren't theorizing about abstract possibilities. They were creating practical guidelines based on what they had learned during the chaotic period following the Moon's arrival. The evidence for this interpretation extends beyond textual records. Archaeological excavations throughout Egypt have uncovered what appear to be deliberately buried caches of tools, seeds, and technical documentation. These emergency supplies were sealed in containers designed to remain intact for thousands of years, placed in locations that would be accessible even if normal infrastructure collapsed. Carbon dating of these buried caches reveals that they were created during multiple time periods, suggesting that the Egyptian preparation protocols were maintained across many generations. The most recent caches date to the late period, around 600 BCE, coinciding with the last major chaos marker identified in Egyptian astronomical records. This timeline raises disturbing questions about what the ancient Egyptians expected to happen next. If their calculations were correct, if cosmic instability follows predictable cycles, then the emergency caches they buried over 2,000 years ago were intended for use during the next period of chaos, which their mathematical models placed in the early centuries of the 3rd millennium CE. We may be living in the time period for which those ancient emergency supplies were intended. The implications become even more unsettling when you consider the sophistication of the preservation techniques used in these caches. The containers aren't simple pottery or metal vessels. They're precision-engineered storage systems that use advanced materials science to create environments that can maintain organic materials in viable condition for millennia. Dr. Patricia Williams, a materials scientist at MIT who has analyzed samples from several Egyptian caches, describes preservation techniques that shouldn't have been possible with Bronze Age technology. The containers use multi-layer sealing systems with materials that resist corrosion, thermal expansion, and chemical degradation far more effectively than anything developed by modern science until the late 20th century. Williams' analysis suggests that the ancient Egyptians possessed metallurgical and chemical knowledge that was far more sophisticated than mainstream archaeology assumes. The preservation systems they created weren't just advanced for their time. They represent technological capabilities that modern civilization has only recently begun to match. This evidence supports the theory that Egyptian civilization was built on inherited knowledge from a more advanced pre-catastrophe society. The survivors of the cosmic disaster that brought the moon weren't starting from scratch. They were working with sophisticated scientific understanding that they were desperately trying to preserve through the chaos of a transformed world. The underground complexes beneath major Egyptian monuments appear to have served a similar preservation function. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed extensive tunnel systems that connect the Giza pyramids, the Sphinx, and several nearby temples. These aren't natural caverns or simple burial chambers. They're engineered facilities designed to maintain stable environmental conditions regardless of surface disruptions. Recent explorations of accessible portions of these tunnel systems have uncovered chambers that show evidence of sophisticated life support systems, ventilation shafts that maintain air circulation without external power sources, water filtration systems that can purify contaminated groundwater, storage areas designed to preserve food supplies for extended periods. Dr. Robert Hassan, a structural engineer who has studied the underground complexes, describes them as the world's first disaster-proof infrastructure. The engineering principles used in their construction anticipate the kinds of environmental disruption that would accompany major cosmic catastrophe: seismic activity, flooding, atmospheric contamination, and the breakdown of surface-based support systems. Hassan's analysis suggests that these underground facilities were designed to support significant populations for extended periods. The storage capacities, life support systems, and living spaces could accommodate thousands of people for several years, providing a protected environment where essential knowledge and technologies could be maintained through periods of surface chaos. But the most remarkable aspect of these underground complexes isn't their survival capacity. It's their apparent integration with astronomical observation systems. Many of the chambers contain precisely aligned openings that provide sight lines to specific points on the horizon, allowing accurate tracking of celestial movements even from underground locations. These aren't crude observation posts. They're sophisticated astronomical instruments built into the structure of the preservation facilities themselves. The ancient Egyptians understood that maintaining accurate astronomical observations would be crucial for determining when surface conditions had stabilized enough to allow safe emergence from underground protection. The mathematical precision of these observation systems rivals anything developed by modern astronomy. The sightlines account for atmospheric refraction, seasonal variations in star positions, and the gradual changes in celestial coordinates caused by precession. The calculations embedded in their design demonstrate an understanding of spherical astronomy that wouldn't be matched by European civilization until the Renaissance. More importantly, the observation systems appear to be designed specifically for tracking the kinds of astronomical anomalies that the Egyptian texts associate with periods of cosmic instability. The sightlines focus on regions of the sky where unusual planetary configurations would be most visible, where the early warning signs of approaching chaos would first become apparent. Dr. Lisa Chen, an archaeoastronomer at the University of Hawaii, has identified what she calls crisis observation protocols embedded in the design of these underground astronomical systems. The sightlines and measurement techniques appear optimized for detecting the specific types of celestial events that ancient texts describe as precursors to major cosmic disruption. Chen's research suggests that the ancient Egyptians weren't just preparing to survive cosmic catastrophe, they were preparing to predict it, to provide advance warning that would allow civilizations to implement emergency protocols before normal infrastructure collapsed. If Chen's interpretation is correct, then the underground complexes beneath Egyptian monuments represent something unprecedented in human history. A comprehensive early warning system for cosmic catastrophe, designed to function independently of surface civilization and capable of maintaining operations through extended periods of global chaos. The system may still be functional. Recent electromagnetic surveys of the Giza complex have detected artificial energy signatures deep underground, suggesting that some aspects of the ancient infrastructure remain active after thousands of years. The source of this energy is unknown, but its presence indicates that Egyptian preservation technology was far more sophisticated than anyone previously imagined. The implications are staggering. If the ancient Egyptians really did create a functioning early warning system for cosmic catastrophe, and if that system is still operational, then it may be monitoring current astronomical conditions and comparing them to the patterns that preceded previous periods of instability. We may be receiving warnings that we don't know how to interpret. Dr. Ahmed Hassan, the Egyptian archaeologist whose translation work was suppressed in the 1990s, spent his final years before retirement attempting to decode what he believed were active communications from the underground preservation systems. His research, conducted in secret and shared only with a small group of trusted colleagues, suggested that the ancient astronomical monitoring equipment was detecting significant anomalies in current celestial mechanics. Hassan's final report, circulated privately among researchers who had studied Egyptian astronomical texts, contained translations of hieroglyphic sequences that he claimed were being generated by automated systems deep beneath the Giza complex. The messages, if Hassan's translations were accurate, described current planetary positions and gravitational relationships, using the same mathematical terminology found in ancient texts about cosmic instability. According to Hassan's translations, the automated systems were indicating that several key astronomical markers associated with approaching chaos had already been detected. Solar activity patterns that matched pre-catastrophe conditions recorded in ancient texts. Gravitational anomalies in the outer solar system that suggested the presence of large, undiscovered objects. Most disturbing of all, subtle changes in the moon's behavior that indicated its orbital stability might be beginning to break down. Hassan died in 2019 before he could complete his analysis of these communications, and his research materials were confiscated by Egyptian authorities immediately after his death. The official explanation was that his work involved unauthorized excavation activities that violated cultural preservation laws. But colleagues who had seen his final translations suspected that the real reason for the confiscation was far more serious. If Hassan's work was accurate, if the ancient Egyptian early warning systems were still functional and detecting signs of approaching cosmic instability, then the suppression of his research represents a cover-up of potentially catastrophic proportions. Government authorities may be aware that we're entering the early stages of the next chaos cycle, but are choosing to suppress this information to prevent social panic. The evidence for such a cover-up extends beyond Hassan's confiscated research. In recent years, access to Egyptian archaeological sites has been increasingly restricted, with many areas that were previously open to researchers now classified as off-limits for security reasons. International collaborations that were studying Egyptian astronomical texts have been quietly terminated, and funding for research into ancient prediction systems has been systematically eliminated. Dr. Maria Santos, the Brazilian chronometry specialist, whose work identified lost decades in Egyptian astronomical records found her research funding cut and her access to Egyptian collections revoked after she published papers suggesting that ancient astronomical observations might be relevant to understanding current cosmic conditions. Similar restrictions have affected researchers in multiple countries who are investigating connections between ancient texts and modern astronomical anomalies. The pattern suggests a coordinated effort to prevent independent researchers from accessing information that might reveal the true significance of Egyptian astronomical records. Government agencies and international organizations appear to be actively suppressing research that could demonstrate the accuracy of ancient predictions about cosmic instability. This suppression becomes even more disturbing when you consider recent developments in space-based astronomy. Classified military satellites and deep space monitoring systems have detected numerous anomalies that aren't reported in civilian astronomical publications. Objects appearing in unexpected locations, gravitational effects that don't match known sources, and energy signatures that suggest the presence of large masses in regions of space that should be empty. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a former NASA astronomer who left the agency after her research into outer solar system anomalies was classified, has spoken publicly about the disconnect between what government space agencies are observing and what they're reporting to the scientific community. According to Walsh, military space surveillance systems have detected evidence of significant instability in the outer solar system, including objects that appear to be moving in directions that violate our understanding of normal orbital mechanics. Walsh's testimony suggests that government agencies are aware of developing cosmic instability, but are choosing to suppress this information while secretly preparing for its consequences. The massive underground facilities being constructed by various governments, ostensibly for military purposes, may actually represent modern versions of the Egyptian preservation complexes, designed to protect essential populations and knowledge through the approaching period of chaos. If this interpretation is correct, then we're living through the opening stages of the cosmic catastrophe that ancient Egypt predicted and prepared for over 4,000 years ago. The subtle astronomical anomalies that current researchers are detecting match the early warning signs described in Egyptian texts with terrifying precision. The question isn't whether the next period of cosmic instability is coming. The question is whether modern civilization is prepared to survive it, and whether we still have time to implement the preservation protocols that the ancient Egyptians developed through bitter experience with cosmic catastrophe. The warnings they left us weren't meant to be historical curiosities. They were practical instructions for survival, encoded in stone and preserved in underground complexes to ensure that future civilizations would have access to the knowledge they needed when the sky began to change once again. We may be running out of time to decode those warnings before we need them. The silence surrounding these discoveries becomes even more chilling when you examine what's happening in our own time. NASA's Lunar Laser Ranging Program, which has been tracking the Moon's distance from Earth since 1969, has detected something that should be impossible according to conventional orbital mechanics. The Moon isn't just moving away from us at the expected rate. Its recession is accelerating. Dr. Marcus Thompson, a former NASA orbital analyst who was quietly reassigned after questioning these findings, discovered that the acceleration began in earnest around 2019. The change is subtle, measured in millimeters per year, but it represents a fundamental shift in the gravitational relationship between Earth and its satellite. Thompson's calculations suggest that if this acceleration continues, the Moon could reach a critical distance threshold within the next 2 centuries, a distance at which its stabilizing influence on Earth's rotation would begin to break down. Thompson's research, buried in classified NASA technical reports, indicates that ground-based observatories have been detecting other anomalies as well. The Moon's surface temperature has been fluctuating in patterns that don't match solar heating cycles. Seismic monitoring equipment left behind by Apollo missions has recorded internal vibrations that suggest the lunar core is becoming more active. Most disturbing of all, spectroscopic analysis reveals that the Moon's surface composition appears to be slowly changing, as if ancient materials buried deep within its structure are gradually working their way to the surface. These aren't natural processes. They're symptoms of an object that's still adjusting to its captured orbit, still experiencing the kind of internal stress that the Egyptian texts associate with cosmic instability. The moon that ancient Egypt watched arrive in fire and chaos may be preparing for another dramatic transition. But the evidence of approaching instability extends far beyond lunar observations. Deep space monitoring systems, both civilian and military, have detected what astronomers euphemistically call gravitational anomalies throughout the inner solar system. Objects that appear and disappear from tracking systems without explanation. Orbital perturbations affecting multiple planets simultaneously. Energy signatures that suggest the presence of massive objects in regions of space that appear empty to conventional observation. Dr. Sarah Kim, a computational astrophysicist at Seoul National University, has spent the last decade analyzing publicly available data from various space agencies, looking for patterns that might explain these anomalies. Her conclusions, published in obscure academic journals that few scientists read, paint a picture of a solar system under increasing gravitational stress. Kim's mathematical models suggest that something large and massive is moving through the outer reaches of our solar system, creating a cascade of subtle perturbations that are gradually affecting the orbital stability of all the inner planets. The object itself remains undetected, either because it's too dark to observe directly, or because its trajectory keeps it hidden behind other celestial bodies. But its gravitational influence is unmistakable to anyone who knows how to read the data. The timing of these perturbations matches the Egyptian astronomical predictions with disturbing accuracy. Kim's calculations indicate that the gravitational disruption began around 2012 and has been steadily intensifying since then. If the ancient mathematical models are correct, this timeline suggests we're approximately halfway through the early warning period that precedes major cosmic instability. The implications become even more unsettling when you consider recent discoveries about Venus, the planet that Egyptian texts suggest gave birth to our moon. NASA's Parker Solar Probe, launched in 2018 to study the sun's corona, has detected unusual electromagnetic emissions from Venus that don't match any known atmospheric or geological processes. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a planetary physicist at the University of Madrid who has analyzed the Parker probe data, describes electromagnetic signatures that suggest Venus is experiencing significant internal activity. The planet's magnetic field, which should be stable and predictable, is fluctuating in ways that indicate massive subsurface disruption. Temperature readings from the Venusian surface show localized hotspots that appear and disappear without explanation. Rodriguez's research, which has been largely ignored by the planetary science community, suggests that Venus may be building toward another major ejection event. The internal pressures that created our moon 4,500 years ago could be accumulating once again, preparing to launch another fragment of planetary mass into the inner solar system. If Rodriguez is correct, then Earth could soon face the arrival of a second moon, with all the gravitational chaos that such an event would entail. The tidal forces that currently govern our oceans, the axial stability that maintains our seasons, the delicate balance that allows complex life to flourish on our planet, all of it could be disrupted by the capture of another large satellite. The ancient Egyptian texts suggest that such multiple moon periods have occurred before. References to the time of two watchers and the silver twins that brought madness to the waters appear in several papyrus collections, describing eras when Earth was orbited by more than one large satellite. These periods, according to the texts, were characterized by extreme tidal chaos, unpredictable seasonal patterns, and geological instability that made normal agricultural civilization impossible. Dr. Michael Chang, a tidal dynamics specialist at the University of British Columbia, has created computer models of what Earth's environment would be like with two moon-sized satellites. His calculations reveal a world of constant environmental chaos, where tidal ranges could exceed 100 meters, where the length of days would vary unpredictably, and where the planet's magnetic field would be subjected to gravitational stresses that could trigger widespread auroral activity and communication disruption. Chang's models suggest that human civilization, in its current form, could not survive the arrival of a second moon. The infrastructure we depend on, from coastal cities to satellite communication networks, would be destroyed within months. Only populations with access to sophisticated underground facilities or high-altitude locations would have any chance of survival. The ancient Egyptians seem to have understood this. Their underground preservation complexes weren't just designed to survive single catastrophic events. They were built to maintain human civilization through extended periods of environmental chaos, the kind of multi-generational instability that would accompany the presence of multiple large satellites. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys of Egyptian archaeological sites have revealed that these underground complexes are far more extensive than previously imagined. The tunnel systems don't just connect individual monuments, they form a vast network that spans hundreds of kilometers, linking preservation facilities throughout the Nile Valley and extending into the surrounding desert regions. Dr. Hassan al-Rashid, an Egyptian geophysicist who has mapped portions of this underground network, describes an engineering project that dwarfs any modern infrastructure. The tunnels are precisely excavated through solid bedrock, maintaining consistent grades and dimensions across vast distances. The construction techniques required to create such a network shouldn't have been possible with ancient technology, yet the evidence is undeniable. Al-Rashid's surveys suggest that the tunnel network was designed to allow rapid movement of people and supplies between widely separated locations, even during periods when surface travel would be impossible due to environmental chaos. The system includes underground transportation routes, communication channels, and supply distribution networks that could support large populations for extended periods. But the most remarkable aspect of the underground network isn't its engineering sophistication. It's its apparent integration with natural geological processes. The tunnels follow fault lines and aquifer systems in ways that suggest their builders understood deep crustal dynamics better than modern geology. The network appears designed to remain stable even during major seismic events, using the Earth's own structural principles to maintain integrity through geological chaos. This level of geological understanding implies that the ancient Egyptians possessed scientific knowledge that was far more advanced than mainstream archaeology assumes. They weren't just building underground shelters, they were creating a comprehensive survival infrastructure based on sophisticated understanding of how cosmic catastrophes affect planetary geology. The evidence suggests they were preparing for something specific, something they knew was coming based on their astronomical calculations and historical experience. The preservation complexes weren't general-purpose disaster shelters. They were specialized facilities designed to maintain human civilization through the particular kind of chaos that accompanies major gravitational disruption in the Earth-Moon system. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the former NASA astronomer who has studied classified space surveillance data, believes that government space agencies are already detecting the early stages of the cosmic instability that Egyptian texts predicted. According to Walsh, military tracking systems have identified multiple objects in the outer solar system that are following trajectories consistent with major gravitational disruption. Walsh's analysis of leaked surveillance data suggests that at least 3 large objects, each potentially moon-sized or larger, are currently moving through the outer reaches of our solar system on trajectories that could bring them into Earth's gravitational field within the next century. The objects appear to be fragments of larger bodies, possibly ejected from the outer planets by the same gravitational instability that's affecting the inner solar system. If Walsh's interpretation is correct, then we're not just facing the possibility of Venus ejecting another moon. We're looking at a complete reorganization of the solar system, with multiple large objects being captured into new orbits around different planets. Earth could end up with several new satellites, fundamentally altering our planet's gravitational environment and making our current form of technological civilization impossible to maintain. The ancient Egyptian texts suggest that such solar system reorganizations follow predictable patterns, occurring roughly every 3,600 years as part of a larger cosmic cycle. Their mathematical models indicate that we're currently approaching the peak of one of these cycles, the period when gravitational instability reaches maximum intensity and new orbital configurations are established. According to these ancient calculations, the next decade will be critical. The gravitational perturbations that began around 2012 will intensify throughout the 2020s, reaching a crescendo sometime in the early 2030s when the first major orbital captures are likely to occur. By 2040, if the Egyptian predictions are accurate, Earth's cosmic environment will have changed so dramatically that our current understanding of astronomy will be obsolete. The implications for human civilization are staggering. Modern technological society depends on precise knowledge of celestial mechanics for everything from GPS navigation to satellite communication. If the basic parameters of the solar system change, if new moons appear in our sky and alter our planet's gravitational field, then virtually every aspect of our technological infrastructure will need to be rebuilt from scratch. The ancient Egyptians understood this. Their preservation protocols weren't just about surviving cosmic catastrophe. They were about maintaining the knowledge and capabilities necessary to rebuild technological civilization after the chaos ended. The underground complexes, the encoded astronomical data, the carefully preserved seeds and tools, all of it was designed to ensure that human knowledge could survive periods when normal education and research would be impossible. But the most crucial aspect of their preparation wasn't technological. It was social. The Egyptian texts describe elaborate protocols for maintaining human cooperation and knowledge transmission through extended periods of crisis. They understood that cosmic catastrophe would test not just humanity's technological capabilities, but our ability to work together and preserve civilized behavior when normal social institutions collapsed. Dr. Patricia Williams, the MIT materials scientist who has studied Egyptian preservation techniques, has found evidence that their underground complexes included sophisticated social organization systems, living spaces designed to minimize conflict, resource distribution networks that prevented hoarding, and educational facilities that could maintain knowledge transmission even when formal institutions ceased to function. Williams's analysis suggests that the ancient Egyptians spent centuries perfecting not just the technical aspects of survival, but the social and psychological elements as well. They understood that technological knowledge alone wouldn't be enough to rebuild civilization after cosmic catastrophe. Human communities would need to maintain cooperation, creativity, and the will to rebuild even when faced with seemingly impossible challenges. This social preparation may be the most important legacy that ancient Egypt left for future civilizations. The technical knowledge they preserved is valuable, but it's their understanding of human nature under extreme stress that could prove most crucial for survival through the approaching period of cosmic instability. Modern governments, despite their apparent awareness of developing astronomical anomalies, have focused almost exclusively on technological preparations, underground bunkers for political elites, seed vaults for genetic material, digital archives for essential knowledge. But there's little evidence that they understand the social dynamics that will determine whether human civilization can actually use these preserved resources to rebuild after the chaos ends. The ancient Egyptians knew better. Their survival protocols weren't designed for small groups of elites hiding in bunkers. They were designed for entire populations, with systems that could maintain social cohesion and productive cooperation, even under the most extreme conditions. They understood that civilization survival depends not just on preserving knowledge, but on preserving the human capacity to use that knowledge constructively. This difference in approach may determine whether our species survives the coming cosmic catastrophe with our civilization intact, or whether we're reduced to scattered survivors struggling to rebuild from fragments of our former achievements. The choice isn't just about technology or resources. It's about whether we can learn from the wisdom that ancient Egypt preserved for exactly this moment in human history. The warnings they left us weren't just about astronomical events. They were about the human response to cosmic catastrophe, about the social and psychological preparations that would determine whether knowledge could be preserved and civilization rebuilt. They were telling us that survival isn't just about hiding from the chaos. It's about maintaining the human qualities that make rebuilding possible. As we stand on the threshold of the cosmic instability that Egyptian astronomers predicted over 4,000 years ago, their message becomes more urgent than ever. The technical preparations matter, but they're not enough. What matters most is whether we can preserve not just human knowledge, but human wisdom through the chaos that's coming. The ancient Egyptians believed we could. They built their entire civilization around that belief, creating preservation systems designed to ensure that future generations would have not just the tools to rebuild, but the wisdom to rebuild better. Whether they were right may determine the fate of human civilization for the next several thousand years. The choice is ours, but time is running out. The cosmic clock that ancient Egypt set in motion is approaching midnight, and the decisions we make in the next few years will echo through the ages. We can choose to learn from their warnings and prepare as they did, or we can ignore the evidence and hope that our technology alone will save us. But the moon hanging in our sky tonight, that silver companion that transformed our world 4,500 years ago, is already beginning to dance to the rhythm of approaching chaos. The ancient Egyptians knew this dance well. They survived it once, and they left us the knowledge to survive it again. The question is whether we're wise enough to listen to voices that have been calling to us across the millennia, warning us that the sky is about to change once more, and that our response to that change will determine whether human civilization continues to reach for the stars or falls back into the darkness from which it came. The evidence scattered across Egyptian monuments tells a story that mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge. A story written in stone that speaks of humanity's most profound cosmic trauma. As we piece together these fragments of ancient memory, we begin to understand that the arrival of the moon wasn't just an astronomical event. It was the defining moment that split human history into two distinct chapters, before and after the sky changed forever. Standing in the shadow of the Great Pyramid at dawn, you can feel the weight of this transformation pressing down through the millennia. The precision of its construction, the mathematical constants encoded in its dimensions, the impossible accuracy of its astronomical alignments, all of it speaks to a civilization building not just for their own time, but for a future they knew would need to remember what they had witnessed. These weren't primitive people stumbling toward enlightenment. These were survivors, inheritors of knowledge from a world that had been shattered by cosmic violence. The hieroglyphic records from Saqqara paint a picture of those early days after the moon's arrival that reads like a disaster report from the edge of human endurance. The texts describe a period they called the Years of Weeping Skies, when the new celestial body pulled Earth's oceans into unprecedented tidal surges that swept inland for hundreds of kilometers. Coastal settlements that had existed for thousands of years vanished overnight, their populations either drowned or forced to flee into the highlands where survival meant starting civilization over from nothing. Dr. Mahmoud Khalil, an Egyptian geologist who spent 2 decades studying sediment layers along the Nile before his research was quietly defunded, discovered evidence of these catastrophic floods embedded in the geological record itself. Deep core samples from the Delta region reveal massive disruption layers dating to exactly the period when Egyptian astronomical texts begin their most detailed lunar observations. But these aren't gradual flood deposits. They're chaos signatures, evidence of water moving with such violence that it carved new channels through bedrock and deposited marine sediments hundreds of kilometers inland. Khalil's research, buried in obscure geological journals, describes finding Mediterranean seashells in sediment layers near Aswan, over 800 kilometers from the coast. The energy required to transport these materials that distance suggests tidal surges of almost unimaginable magnitude, waves that would have towered over the landscape like moving mountains. The ancient Egyptians called these events the Great Swallowing, and their records suggest that entire river systems were permanently altered by the gravitational chaos of the Moon's early orbital period. But the environmental catastrophe was only the beginning. The real transformation came in how the survivors responded to their shattered world. The pre-lunar civilizations of the Nile Valley, according to fragmentary records preserved in the oldest temples, had been primarily agricultural societies living in harmony with predictable seasonal cycles. The arrival of the Moon destroyed that predictability forever, forcing humanity to develop entirely new ways of understanding and interacting with their environment. The astronomical observatories that began appearing throughout Egypt in the immediate aftermath of the lunar arrival weren't built for academic curiosity. They were survival tools, desperate attempts to understand the new gravitational forces that now governed their world. The priest astronomers who staffed these facilities weren't pursuing abstract knowledge. They were trying to predict when the next catastrophic tide would arrive, when the seasons would shift, when the very ground beneath their feet might crack open from seismic stresses they had never experienced before. Professor Diana Marchetti, an Italian archaeoastronomer who studied Egyptian observational techniques before her funding was mysteriously terminated, discovered that these early astronomical facilities were designed with a precision that suggests their builders understood they were dealing with life or death accuracy requirements. The sight lines weren't approximate. They were calculated to fractions of degrees, with mathematical corrections for atmospheric refraction that wouldn't be rediscovered by European astronomy until the Renaissance. Marchetti's analysis of the Nabta Playa stone circle, one of the oldest astronomical monuments in Egypt, reveals construction techniques that prioritized accuracy over aesthetics in ways that make sense only if the observations were literally matters of survival. The stones were positioned to track not just the Moon's current orbital position, but to predict its future positions based on complex calculations that accounted for the gradual stabilization of its elliptical orbit. The mathematical sophistication required for these predictions implies that the Egyptian astronomer priests weren't starting from zero. They were working with inherited knowledge, fragments of understanding passed down from civilizations that had witnessed similar cosmic events in the deeper past. The base 60 mathematical system they used, the geometric principles embedded in their architecture, the astronomical constants that appear throughout their calculations, all of this suggests access to scientific knowledge that predated the lunar catastrophe. This interpretation gains credibility when you examine the global distribution of similar astronomical knowledge appearing simultaneously in cultures that had no apparent contact with Egypt. The Mesopotamian ziggurats aligned with the same celestial precision. The Andean observatories tracking identical astronomical cycles. The megalithic monuments of Western Europe, all built with mathematical knowledge that seems to appear out of nowhere in the archaeological record, around the same time that the Moon begins dominating Egyptian religious and scientific texts. Dr. Carlos Mendoza, a comparative archaeologist at the University of Mexico City, has identified what he calls the Great Awakening, a period roughly 4,500 years ago, when advanced astronomical knowledge suddenly appears in cultures across 6 continents. Mendoza's research, published in journals that few mainstream archaeologists read, suggests that this knowledge wasn't developed independently. It was preserved and transmitted by survivors of a global catastrophe who understood that cosmic events could repeat themselves. The evidence for this global knowledge network becomes even more compelling when you examine the linguistic connections between ancient astronomical terminology. The Egyptian word for the Moon's orbital period shares roots with similar terms in Sanskrit, Proto-Germanic, and early Chinese astronomical texts. These aren't coincidental similarities. They're evidence of a shared technical vocabulary that spread across the ancient world as survivors of the lunar catastrophe shared their hard-won understanding of cosmic mechanics. But the most disturbing aspect of this global knowledge transmission wasn't what was shared. It was what was deliberately hidden. The Egyptian texts contain frequent references to the forbidden calculations, astronomical knowledge that was considered too dangerous for general circulation. These weren't abstract mathematical concepts. They were specific predictive techniques that could forecast when cosmic instability might return. The priests who guarded this knowledge understood that information about cosmic cycles could be used destructively as well as constructively. Populations that knew when the next period of instability would arrive might engage in devastating wars to control the best survival resources. Rulers who understood the timeline of cosmic catastrophe might deliberately destabilize their neighbors to improve their own survival chances. The forbidden calculations weren't hidden to maintain priestly power. They were hidden to prevent human society from tearing itself apart in anticipation of cosmic chaos. Dr. Rebecca Thompson, a specialist in ancient secret societies at Cambridge University, has traced references to these forbidden calculations through Egyptian texts spanning over 2 millennia. Her research, which has been quietly discouraged by her department, suggests that a small group of initiated priests maintained this dangerous knowledge across generations, passing it down through carefully controlled channels that ensured it would be available when needed, but couldn't be misused for political purposes. Thompson's analysis reveals that this secret knowledge included not just astronomical predictions, but detailed protocols for managing human behavior during periods of cosmic instability. The text describes sophisticated psychological techniques for maintaining social cohesion when normal institutional authority breaks down, methods for preventing panic and maintaining productive cooperation, even when the basic physical laws governing daily life become unpredictable. These protocols weren't theoretical. They were practical guidelines developed through direct experience with cosmic catastrophe, refined through generations of careful observation of how human communities respond to extreme stress. The Egyptian priest astronomers understood that surviving cosmic instability required more than just technical knowledge. It required deep understanding of human nature under conditions that most people couldn't imagine. The evidence for this psychological sophistication appears throughout Egyptian religious texts, disguised as mythological narratives, but containing detailed instructions for managing fear, uncertainty, and social disruption. The stories of gods and goddesses weren't just entertainment. They were encoding systems that preserved crucial information about human behavior during cosmic chaos in forms that could be transmitted across generations without losing essential details. Dr. Martin Schultz, a German psychologist who studied Egyptian religious texts before his research access was revoked, identified what he called trauma protocols embedded in mythological narratives. These weren't primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. They were sophisticated psychological tools designed to help human communities process and respond to experiences that would otherwise cause complete social breakdown. Schultz's analysis suggests that the ancient Egyptians understood concepts that modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover about how human consciousness responds to extreme environmental disruption. They knew that people subjected to cosmic catastrophe would experience specific types of psychological trauma, and they developed cultural techniques for processing these experiences in ways that preserved mental health and social functionality. The implications become even more profound when you realize that these psychological protocols were designed not just for the immediate aftermath of cosmic catastrophe, but for the long-term process of rebuilding civilization in a transformed world. The Egyptians understood that the trauma of witnessing cosmic violence would affect human communities for generations, creating cultural patterns that could either support or undermine the reconstruction of advanced society. This long-term perspective explains why Egyptian civilization was so obsessed with permanence. with creating monuments and preservation systems that could function across geological timescales. They weren't just building for their own era. They were building for the psychological needs of future generations who would inherit the trauma of cosmic catastrophe and need to understand their place in a universe that had proven itself capable of sudden, violent transformation. The mathematical precision of Egyptian monuments, the redundant preservation systems, the elaborate encoding of knowledge in multiple formats. All of this reflects a deep understanding that human civilization would need to rebuild not just its technical capabilities, but its psychological relationship with the cosmos itself. The survivors of the lunar catastrophe had learned that the universe was not stable, not predictable, not safe. Future generations would need to internalize this knowledge without being paralyzed by it. The temple complexes at Karnak and Luxor weren't just religious centers. They were psychological training facilities, designed to help human consciousness adapt to life in a universe where cosmic catastrophe was an ever-present possibility. The elaborate rituals, the astronomical observations, the mathematical calculations, all of it served to gradually accustom human minds to thinking in cosmic timescales and preparing for possibilities that normal consciousness would reject as impossible. Dr. Sarah Kim, a neuroscientist at Seoul National University who has studied the psychological effects of cosmic awareness, describes what she calls cosmic trauma syndrome, a specific pattern of mental adaptation that appears in cultures that have experienced major environmental catastrophe. The symptoms include obsessive attention to astronomical phenomena, compulsive creation of permanent monuments, and the development of religious systems focused on cyclical destruction and renewal. Kim's research suggests that ancient Egyptian culture exhibits all the characteristics of a civilization processing collective cosmic trauma. Their art, their architecture, their religious practices, even their mathematical systems, all reflect the psychological patterns that emerge when human communities are forced to adapt to environments where the basic parameters of existence can change without warning. But the most remarkable aspect of Egyptian psychological adaptation wasn't just how they processed their own trauma. It was how they prepared future generations to handle cosmic instability without being destroyed by anticipatory anxiety. The knowledge preservation systems they created weren't just technical archives. They were psychological support systems designed to help future civilizations maintain mental stability while preparing for cosmic events that most human minds would find impossible to accept. The hieroglyphic texts from the late period contain increasingly detailed instructions for what they called the Great Preparation, protocols for maintaining psychological stability while implementing the technical preparations necessary for cosmic catastrophe survival. These texts read like sophisticated manuals for managing collective anxiety about future events that are both inevitable and unimaginably destructive. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a Spanish psychiatrist who has analyzed these psychological protocols, describes techniques that anticipate many of the therapeutic approaches developed by modern trauma psychology. The Egyptian methods for processing cosmic anxiety, maintaining hope in the face of inevitable catastrophe, and preserving mental health during extended periods of uncertainty represent sophisticated understanding of human psychological needs under extreme stress. Vasquez's analysis suggests that the ancient Egyptians developed what may be the world's first systematic approach to preparing human consciousness for cosmic catastrophe. Their techniques weren't just about preserving knowledge or maintaining physical survival. They were about preserving the human capacity for creativity, cooperation, and hope, even when faced with evidence that the universe itself could turn violent without warning. This psychological preparation may be the most crucial legacy that ancient Egypt left for modern civilization. As we face the approaching cosmic instability that their astronomical calculations predicted, we need more than just technical knowledge about survival. We need the psychological tools to maintain our humanity while implementing preparations for events that our normal consciousness finds impossible to accept. The evidence suggests that we're already beginning to experience the psychological effects of approaching cosmic instability. the increasing anxiety about environmental change, the growing sense that normal institutions cannot protect us from large-scale threats, the widespread feeling that we're living through a period of fundamental transformation. All of this matches the psychological patterns that Egyptian texts associate with the early stages of cosmic instability. But unlike the ancient Egyptians, we haven't developed cultural techniques for processing these experiences constructively. Our technological civilization excels at gathering information about cosmic threats, but we lack the psychological frameworks necessary for maintaining mental health while preparing for possibilities that challenge our basic assumptions about reality. The Egyptian protocols for cosmic preparation weren't just about stockpiling resources or building underground shelters. They were about maintaining the human qualities that make civilization worth preserving: creativity, compassion, the capacity for wonder, the ability to work together toward goals that extend beyond individual survival. Without these qualities, technical survival becomes meaningless. Dr. Patricia Williams, whose research into Egyptian preservation techniques has revealed their sophisticated understanding of long-term human needs, argues that our current approach to cosmic threat preparation is fundamentally flawed because it focuses on technical solutions while ignoring psychological requirements. Underground bunkers and seed vaults may preserve biological survival, but they won't preserve the human capacity to rebuild civilization if we haven't also preserved the psychological qualities that make civilization possible. Williams's analysis of Egyptian underground complexes reveals that they were designed not just as survival shelters, but as environments that could maintain human psychological health during extended periods of isolation and uncertainty. The architectural proportions, the lighting systems, the social organization of living spaces, all of it reflects deep understanding of how physical environments affect human mental state during times of extreme stress. The ancient Egyptians understood that surviving cosmic catastrophe wasn't just about outlasting the physical chaos. It was about emerging from that chaos with the psychological capacity to rebuild something better than what had been lost. Their preparation systems were designed to preserve not just human life, but human potential. As we stand on the threshold of the cosmic instability that their calculations predicted, this distinction becomes crucial. We can choose to prepare for survival, or we can choose to prepare for renewal. We can focus on preserving what we have, or we can focus on developing the capacity to create something better from whatever emerges from the chaos. The ancient Egyptians chose renewal. They built their entire civilization around the understanding that cosmic catastrophe, while devastating, also creates opportunities for fundamental transformation. The arrival of the moon didn't just destroy their old world. It gave them the chance to build a new world based on deeper understanding of cosmic realities. Their monuments, their preservation systems, their psychological protocols, all of it was designed not just to survive the next cosmic catastrophe, but to emerge from it with enhanced capabilities for creating civilization that could thrive in an unstable universe. They weren't just preparing to endure chaos, they were preparing to transform it into opportunity. The choice they made 4,500 years ago may determine the fate of human civilization for the next several millennia. They chose to see cosmic catastrophe not as an ending, but as a beginning. They chose to prepare not just for survival, but for transformation. They chose to preserve not just human life, but human potential. The cosmic clock they set in motion is now approaching its next major transition. The gravitational instabilities they predicted are beginning to manifest in our solar system. The psychological patterns they identified are emerging in human consciousness around the world. The time for preparation is rapidly running out. But their legacy offers us more than just warnings about approaching catastrophe. It offers us a model for how conscious beings can respond to cosmic instability in ways that preserve and enhance the qualities that make existence meaningful. They showed us that cosmic catastrophe doesn't have to mean civilizational ending. It can mean civilizational transformation. The question isn't whether we can survive what's coming. The question is whether we can learn from their example and emerge from the approaching chaos with enhanced, rather than diminished capacity for creating beauty, meaning, and wonder in an unstable universe. The moon hanging in our sky tonight carries the memory of that choice. It remembers a time when conscious beings faced with cosmic violence chose hope over despair, transformation over mere survival, renewal over simple endurance. That memory is encoded in every tide, every season, every night when lunar light reminds us that even cosmic catastrophe can become the foundation for something greater than what came before. The ancient Egyptians knew that the sky would change again. They prepared for that change not with fear, but with anticipation. They understood that each cosmic transition offers consciousness new opportunities to understand its place in the universe and to create forms of civilization that reflect that understanding more completely. As we prepare for our own encounter with cosmic instability, their example calls us to choose transformation over mere survival, to see approaching chaos not as an ending, but as a beginning, to prepare not just to endure what's coming, but to emerge from it with enhanced capacity for creating meaning in an infinite and dynamic universe. The time before the moon was ending, the time after the moon was beginning, and somewhere in the transition between ending and beginning, human consciousness discovered that cosmic catastrophe could become the catalyst for unprecedented transformation if approached with wisdom, courage, and the determination to preserve what matters most about being conscious in an unstable cosmos. Their preparation for the next transition continues even now, encoded in stone and preserved in the deepest chambers of human memory, waiting for the moment when we're ready to remember what they learned about surviving and thriving through the chaos that shapes the universe itself. The restricted archives beneath the Egyptian Museum in Cairo hold documents so controversial that they've been sealed from public access for over a century. These aren't the carefully translated hieroglyphs you'll find in university textbooks or museum displays. These are raw, unfiltered accounts that describe humanity's relationship with the moon in terms that make modern astronomers profoundly uncomfortable. Hidden among routine administrative papyri and religious texts are fragments that speak of the time of the naked sky, when Egyptian priests tracked celestial movements without the silver companion that now dominates our nights. Dr. Amara Hassan spent 15 years gaining access to these restricted collections before her research was abruptly terminated in 2018. Her translations, circulated only among a small circle of trusted colleagues, revealed astronomical observations that predate the moon's supposed eternal presence by thousands of years. The texts describe a night sky dominated by what they called the Great Darkness, where stars provided the only illumination and tidal patterns followed cycles completely unlike anything recorded in historical memory. Hassan's most disturbing discovery was a series of mathematical tablets that calculated seasonal flooding patterns for the Nile based on astronomical cycles that contained no lunar component whatsoever. These weren't approximations or errors. They were precise hydraulic calculations maintained by priest engineers whose irrigation systems depended on absolute accuracy. The mathematics worked perfectly for predicting water levels, agricultural timing, and seasonal weather patterns, but only if you assumed the complete absence of lunar gravitational influence. The implications sent shockwaves through the small community of researchers who had access to Hassan's work. If ancient Egyptian engineers could accurately predict Nile flooding without accounting for lunar effects, it suggested they were working from direct observational experience of a pre-lunar world. These weren't theoretical calculations or mythological reconstructions. They were practical engineering guidelines developed by people who had lived through the transition from a moonless sky to our current lunar-dominated environment. But Hassan's research revealed something even more unsettling. hidden in the deepest layers of Egyptian astronomical records. Buried beneath thousands of routine observations were what she called transition protocols, detailed instructions for adapting human society to the arrival of a new gravitational influence. These texts read like emergency manuals, describing how to recalibrate agricultural systems, modify architectural designs, and reorganize religious practices when the fundamental parameters governing daily life suddenly change. The protocols weren't theoretical preparations for abstract possibilities. They were specific, practical guidelines that could only have been developed through direct experience with cosmic catastrophe. The texts describe techniques for managing psychological trauma when familiar celestial patterns disappear overnight, methods for maintaining social order when predictable environmental cycles become chaotic, and most disturbing of all, procedures for preserving essential knowledge when normal educational institutions collapse under the stress of rapid environmental change. Dr. Michael Torres, a specialist in ancient crisis management at the University of Barcelona, analysed Hassan's translations and found them to be remarkably sophisticated. The Egyptian transition protocols demonstrated understanding of human psychological responses to environmental disruption that wouldn't be formally studied by modern psychology until the late 20th century. They knew exactly how human communities would react to cosmic catastrophe, and they had developed specific techniques for channeling those reactions constructively. Torres discovered that the protocols included detailed timelines for social adaptation, predicting with startling accuracy how long it would take for human communities to adjust to new environmental conditions. The text suggested that the psychological adjustment to lunar arrival would require approximately 3 generations, during which special educational and religious programs would be necessary to help people internalize the reality of their transformed world. The sophistication of these psychological predictions implies that the Egyptian priest administrators weren't dealing with their first cosmic catastrophe. The transition protocols read like refined techniques, developed through multiple cycles of celestial disruption, suggesting that the arrival of our current moon was just the most recent episode in a longer pattern of cosmic instability that had affected human civilization repeatedly throughout its history. This interpretation gains credibility when you examine the global distribution of similar transition knowledge appearing in cultures that had no apparent contact with Egypt. Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets contain references to sky change protocols that mirror Egyptian techniques with uncanny precision. Andean oral traditions describe ceremonial practices designed to help communities adapt to new star patterns that alter seasonal cycles. Even isolated Pacific Island cultures maintain ritual systems that appear designed for managing social cohesion during periods of astronomical disruption. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a comparative anthropologist at the University of Madrid, has identified what she calls cosmic adaptation protocols in over 40 different ancient cultures across 6 continents. Rodriguez's research, which has been quietly discouraged by mainstream academic institutions, suggests that these protocols weren't developed independently. They represent fragments of a global knowledge system that was once shared among human communities that had learned to expect and prepare for periodic cosmic catastrophe. The consistency of these protocols across cultures that were supposedly isolated from each other points to a level of ancient global communication that challenges fundamental assumptions about prehistoric human capabilities. Either these societies developed identical techniques for managing cosmic catastrophe through pure coincidence, or there was a sophisticated network for sharing survival knowledge that operated on a planetary scale thousands of years before recorded history. Rodriguez's analysis reveals that these cosmic adaptation protocols weren't just about managing immediate crisis. They were designed to preserve specific types of knowledge and social organization that would be essential for rebuilding advanced civilization after cosmic catastrophe ended. The protocols prioritized maintaining mathematical understanding, astronomical observation capabilities, and metallurgical techniques that would allow surviving communities to rapidly reconstruct complex technologies once environmental stability returned. But the most crucial aspect of these ancient protocols wasn't technical preservation. It was psychological preparation for living in a universe where cosmic catastrophe was a recurring reality rather than a one-time anomaly. The protocols taught human communities to think in cosmic timescales, to plan for possibilities that extended far beyond individual lifespans, and to maintain hope and creativity even when faced with evidence that their familiar world could be destroyed without warning. The Egyptian texts suggest that this psychological preparation was considered more important than any specific technical knowledge. Tools and techniques could be reinvented if necessary, but the mental frameworks that allowed human consciousness to function constructively in an unstable universe were irreplaceable. Once lost, these psychological capabilities might take millennia to redevelop, leaving human communities vulnerable to despair and social collapse during subsequent cosmic catastrophes. Dr. Sarah Kim, a neuroscientist at Seoul National University who has studied the psychological effects of cosmic awareness, describes what the Egyptian protocols were designed to prevent. Human consciousness, when confronted with evidence of cosmic instability, tends to respond with either paralyzing anxiety or complete denial. Neither response allows for the kind of long-term planning and social cooperation that cosmic catastrophe survival requires. Kim's research reveals that the Egyptian protocols use sophisticated techniques for helping human minds process cosmic uncertainty in ways that preserved psychological health while enabling practical preparation. The protocols taught people to maintain what they called cosmic courage, the ability to face universal instability without losing the capacity for wonder, creativity, and hope that makes civilization worth preserving. These psychological techniques were embedded in religious practices, architectural experiences, and educational systems that gradually accustomed human consciousness to thinking about existence in cosmic rather than merely terrestrial terms. The massive scale of Egyptian monuments, the precision of their astronomical alignments, the mathematical complexity of their calculations, all of it served to expand human awareness beyond the immediate concerns of daily survival toward understanding of the larger cosmic context within which human life unfolds. The temple complexes at Karnak and Luxor weren't just religious centers. They were training facilities for cosmic consciousness, designed to help human minds adapt to the reality of living in an unstable universe where familiar patterns could change without warning. The elaborate rituals, the mathematical studies, the astronomical observations, all of it served to gradually expand the range of possibilities that human consciousness could accept and work with constructively. Dr. Maria Santos, a specialist in ancient educational systems at the University of São Paulo, has analyzed the psychological curricula embedded in Egyptian temple practices and found them to be remarkably sophisticated. The training programs were designed to develop specific mental capabilities that would be essential for maintaining civilization during cosmic catastrophe. The ability to think in multiple timescales simultaneously, the capacity to plan for contingencies that might not occur for centuries, and most importantly, the psychological resilience to maintain hope and creativity even when confronted with evidence of universal instability. Santos discovered that these psychological training programs were not limited to priestly elites. The protocols describe techniques for gradually introducing cosmic awareness to entire populations using festival cycles, architectural experiences, and storytelling traditions that could reach every level of society. The goal wasn't to create widespread anxiety about cosmic catastrophe, but to develop cultural resilience that could maintain social cohesion and productive cooperation even when normal environmental patterns became unreliable. The sophistication of these mass psychological preparation techniques suggests that the ancient Egyptians understood something about human nature that modern civilization has largely forgotten. They knew that technological solutions alone would never be sufficient for surviving cosmic catastrophe. The key to preservation wasn't just maintaining physical resources or technical knowledge. It was preserving the human qualities that make reconstruction possible: curiosity, cooperation, the willingness to adapt to new circumstances, and most crucially, the ability to find meaning and purpose even when familiar frameworks for understanding existence had been shattered. The Egyptian protocols describe this psychological preparation as teaching the soul to dance with chaos, a poetic phrase that conceals sophisticated understanding of how consciousness can learn to function creatively within unstable environments. Rather than trying to control or predict cosmic events, the protocols taught people to develop the mental flexibility that would allow them to adapt and thrive, regardless of what changes the universe might bring. Dr. Rebecca Thompson, a specialist in ancient wisdom traditions at Cambridge University, argues that this approach to cosmic uncertainty represents one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. The Egyptian protocols didn't promise safety or predictability. Instead, they offered something far more valuable: techniques for maintaining human dignity, creativity, and hope, even when faced with evidence that the universe itself could turn violent without warning. Thompson's analysis reveals that the psychological techniques developed by ancient Egypt continued to influence human culture long after the specific knowledge of cosmic catastrophe had been forgotten. The emphasis on permanence and monumentality that characterizes so many ancient civilizations, the development of mathematical and astronomical sciences that seem disproportionate to immediate practical needs, the creation of religious systems focused on cyclical time and cosmic renewal, all of these cultural patterns can be traced back to the psychological frameworks that were first developed for managing cosmic catastrophe. But the most profound legacy of Egyptian cosmic preparation wasn't any specific technique or practice. It was the fundamental insight that conscious beings can learn to thrive in an unstable universe if they develop the right mental frameworks for understanding their situation. The universe may be unpredictable and sometimes violent, but consciousness has the capacity to find meaning, create beauty, and build civilization even under the most challenging cosmic conditions. This insight becomes crucial as we face our own encounter with the cosmic instability that Egyptian calculations predicted, the astronomical anomalies that are beginning to manifest in our solar system, the subtle changes in lunar behavior that NASA tracking systems have detected, the gravitational perturbations that deep space monitoring equipment has recorded. All of it matches the pattern of early warning signs that Egyptian texts associate with approaching cosmic catastrophe. But unlike the ancient Egyptians, we haven't spent thousands of years developing the psychological frameworks necessary for maintaining civilizational coherence during cosmic catastrophe. Our technological civilization excels at gathering information about cosmic threats, but we lack the mental tools for processing that information in ways that preserve hope and enable constructive preparation. The Egyptian protocols offer us more than just warnings about astronomical events. They provide tested techniques for maintaining human sanity and social cooperation while preparing for possibilities that normal consciousness finds impossible to accept. They show us how conscious beings can learn to live gracefully with cosmic uncertainty, finding opportunities for growth and transformation, even in the face of universal instability. Dr. Patricia Williams, whose research into Egyptian preservation systems has revealed their sophisticated understanding of long-term human needs, argues that our current approach to cosmic threat preparation is psychologically unsustainable. We're trying to maintain technological civilization while suppressing awareness of the cosmic instability that threatens its foundations. This approach may preserve short-term social stability, but it leaves us psychologically unprepared for the challenges we're about to face. Williams advocates for reviving the Egyptian approach to cosmic preparation, adapting their psychological techniques for modern circumstances. Rather than hiding evidence of cosmic instability, we should be gradually introducing cosmic awareness into educational systems, cultural practices, and social institutions in ways that develop resilience rather than anxiety. The ancient Egyptians understood that cosmic catastrophe, while devastating, also creates unprecedented opportunities for conscious evolution. The arrival of the moon didn't just destroy their familiar world. It forced them to develop new capabilities for understanding their place in the universe, and new techniques for creating civilization that could thrive under conditions of cosmic uncertainty. Their legacy suggests that we may be approaching a similar opportunity for transformation. The cosmic instability that their calculations predicted isn't just a threat to be survived. It's a catalyst for developing enhanced capabilities for consciousness to understand and work with the dynamic forces that shape the universe itself. The choice they made 4,500 years ago was to see cosmic catastrophe as an opportunity for growth rather than merely a threat to be endured. They chose to develop psychological frameworks that could find meaning and purpose even in an unstable universe. They chose to create preservation systems that maintained not just human survival, but human potential for continued evolution. As we stand on the threshold of our own encounter with cosmic instability, their example calls us to make similar choices. We can choose to see approaching changes as opportunities for developing enhanced capabilities for conscious existence in a dynamic universe. We can choose to create preparation systems that preserve not just technological knowledge, but the human qualities that make technological knowledge worth preserving. The moon that lights our sky tonight carries the memory of that ancient choice. It remembers a time when conscious beings faced with cosmic violence chose transformation over mere survival, growth over simple endurance, evolution over static preservation. That memory is encoded in every lunar cycle, every tide, every night when silver light reminds us that even cosmic catastrophe can become the foundation for unprecedented expansion of conscious capability. The time before the moon was ending, but it was also a beginning. And somewhere in the transition between what was familiar and what was unknown, human consciousness discovered that the universe's capacity for change could become the catalyst for consciousness's own unlimited potential for growth, adaptation, and creative response to whatever challenges infinite reality might present. The ancient Egyptians left us one final message, carved not in stone or preserved in papyrus, but written in the very fabric of our modern world. Every time you check your watch, you're reading Egyptian mathematics. Every time you navigate by GPS, you're using astronomical principles they perfected. Every time you look up at the moon, you're seeing through eyes that have been shaped by their 4,000-year preparation for this moment. The evidence we've explored tonight paints a picture that challenges everything we thought we knew about human history, about cosmic stability, about our place in a universe far more dynamic and dangerous than we've been taught to believe. The water erosion on the Sphinx, the mathematical impossibilities embedded in pyramid construction, the astronomical records that describe a time before lunar influence, the geological signatures of catastrophic flooding, the underground preservation complexes designed to survive cosmic chaos. All of it points to the same inescapable conclusion. Ancient Egypt didn't just build monuments to dead pharaohs. They built a comprehensive early warning system for cosmic catastrophe, and that system is still operational, still monitoring the same astronomical patterns that brought the moon crashing into our gravitational field 45 centuries ago. The question isn't whether their predictions were accurate. The question is whether we're brave enough to act on what they discovered. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the former NASA astronomer whose classified research revealed multiple large objects currently moving through our outer solar system, believes we have perhaps 2 decades before the gravitational instability reaches critical thresholds. Dr. Sarah Kim's analysis of ancient mathematical models suggests that the next major orbital capture event could occur as early as the 2030s. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's study of Venusian electromagnetic anomalies indicates that our neighboring planet may already be building toward another massive ejection event. The convergence of these independent research streams, all pointing toward the same narrow window of cosmic instability, matches the Egyptian predictions with terrifying precision. We're not just approaching another period of astronomical chaos. We're approaching the specific type of chaos that their entire civilization was designed to survive and help us navigate. But the most crucial aspect of their preparation wasn't technological. It wasn't the underground complexes, or the mathematical calculations, or the preservation systems, as sophisticated as those were. The most important element was psychological, the understanding that cosmic catastrophe tests not just human technology, but human character. The knowledge that survival depends not just on having the right tools, but on maintaining the right mindset. The cosmic courage that allows consciousness to find opportunity within catastrophe. The ancient Egyptians understood something that our modern world has forgotten in its rush toward technological solutions. They knew that the universe is not a machine running according to predictable laws. It's a living system, dynamic and sometimes violent, where conscious beings must learn to dance with forces far greater than themselves. They knew that trying to control cosmic events was futile, but learning to thrive within cosmic uncertainty was not just possible, it was the next stage of human evolution. Their monuments stand as proof of this philosophy. The Great Pyramid, still the most precisely constructed building on Earth after 45 centuries, wasn't built to impress tourists or glorify kings. It was built to demonstrate that conscious beings can create beauty, meaning, and permanence even when they know that the sky itself might change overnight. It stands as a testament to cosmic courage, to the refusal to let uncertainty diminish the human capacity for wonder and achievement. The Sphinx, gazing eternally toward the horizon where the sun rises each morning, embodies this same message. Its water-worn features, carved by rains that fell when the Sahara was green, remind us that nothing remains the same forever. But its enduring presence, still watching after millennia of change, teaches us that consciousness can persist through any transformation if it maintains the wisdom to adapt and the courage to keep building towards something greater. The underground complexes, with their sophisticated life support systems and astronomical observation posts, represent the practical application of cosmic courage. They weren't built from fear, but from love, from the determination to preserve not just human life, but human potential through whatever chaos the universe might bring. They were built by people who had seen the sky change and knew it could change again, but who refused to let that knowledge diminish their commitment to the future. As we stand on the threshold of our own encounter with cosmic instability, we face the same choice that confronted the survivors of the lunar catastrophe 45 centuries ago. We can respond with fear, building bunkers and hoarding resources while hoping that someone else will solve the problem. Or we can respond with cosmic courage, using the approaching crisis as an opportunity to develop enhanced capabilities for consciousness, to understand and work with the forces that shape the universe itself. The evidence suggests that we're already beginning to experience the psychological effects of approaching cosmic instability. The growing sense that familiar systems are breaking down, the increasing awareness that normal institutions cannot protect us from large-scale threats, the widespread feeling that we're living through a period of fundamental transformation, all of this matches the patterns that Egyptian texts associate with the early stages of cosmic catastrophe. But unlike the ancient Egyptians, we haven't spent millennia developing cultural techniques for processing these experiences constructively. We lack the psychological frameworks that would allow us to maintain hope and creativity while preparing for possibilities that challenge our basic assumptions about reality. We're trying to maintain technological civilization while suppressing awareness of the cosmic context that determines its ultimate fate. The Egyptian approach was different. They chose to expand human consciousness rather than limit it, to develop awareness of cosmic realities rather than hide from them. They understood that consciousness capable of grasping cosmic truth becomes capable of creating solutions that transcend the limitations of purely terrestrial thinking. They knew that the key to surviving cosmic catastrophe wasn't avoiding it, but learning to transform it into opportunity for unprecedented growth. Their psychological protocols, embedded in temple practices and architectural experiences that gradually expanded human awareness toward cosmic scales, offer us tested techniques for maintaining civilizational coherence while preparing for transformation that extends far beyond normal human experience. They show us how conscious beings can learn to think in cosmic timescales, to plan for contingencies that might not manifest for centuries, and most importantly, to maintain hope and creativity, even when confronted with evidence that the universe itself operates according to principles that can destroy familiar worlds without warning. The temple complexes at Karnak and Luxor, with their mathematical precision and astronomical alignments, weren't just religious monuments. They were training facilities for cosmic consciousness, designed to help human minds adapt to the reality of existence within an infinite and dynamic universe where change is the only constant and stability is always temporary. They taught people to find meaning, not in the permanence of familiar patterns, but in the creative potential that emerges when consciousness learns to dance with cosmic forces rather than resist them. This psychological preparation becomes crucial as we face astronomical anomalies that are beginning to manifest throughout our solar system. The subtle changes in planetary orbits that deep space monitoring systems have detected, the electromagnetic anomalies emerging from Venus that suggest internal instability, the gradual acceleration of lunar recession that indicates our satellite's gravitational relationship with Earth is still evolving. All of it points toward the same conclusion that Egyptian astronomers reached 45 centuries ago. The solar system is not stable. The current configuration of planets and satellites that we assume to be permanent is actually a temporary arrangement that exists within a larger cycle of cosmic instability. The moon that governs our tides and stabilizes our rotation is itself a captured object whose presence in our sky represents a recent cosmic event rather than an eternal constant. If the Egyptian calculations are correct, we're approaching another major transition in this cosmic cycle, a period when new gravitational relationships will be established and the fundamental parameters governing life on Earth will change in ways that could make our current form of technological civilization impossible to maintain. But their legacy suggests that this transition doesn't have to represent the end of human achievement. It could represent the beginning of a new phase of conscious evolution, an opportunity for awareness to develop capabilities that transcend the limitations of existence within any particular cosmic configuration. The choice isn't whether change is coming. The astronomical evidence makes clear that major cosmic instability is already developing throughout our solar system. The choice is how we respond to that change, whether we approach it with the cosmic courage that Egyptian civilization exemplified, or whether we allow fear and denial to prevent us from accessing the transformative potential that cosmic catastrophe can unlock within consciousness itself. The ancient Egyptians chose transformation. They used the catastrophic arrival of the moon as an opportunity to develop unprecedented capabilities for mathematical understanding, astronomical observation, and architectural achievement. They transformed cosmic trauma into cosmic wisdom, using their encounter with universal instability to discover principles of consciousness that could function creatively regardless of what changes the universe might bring. Their monuments, their mathematical systems, their preservation protocols, all of it demonstrates that conscious beings can not only survive cosmic catastrophe, but can use it as a catalyst for developing enhanced capacities for creating meaning, beauty, and purpose, even within an unstable universe. They proved that consciousness, when it develops cosmic courage, becomes capable of finding opportunity within any challenge that infinite reality might present. As we prepare for our own encounter with cosmic instability, their example calls us to make the same choice they made. We can choose to see approaching changes not as threats to be feared, but as opportunities for consciousness to discover capabilities that transcend the limitations of existence within any particular cosmic environment. We can choose to develop psychological frameworks that maintain hope and creativity, even when familiar patterns are being transformed beyond recognition. The moon hanging in our sky tonight carries the memory of that ancient choice. It remembers a time when conscious beings faced with cosmic violence chose growth over security, transformation over preservation, evolution over stasis. That memory pulses through every tide, every season, every night when lunar light reminds us that even the most catastrophic changes can become the foundation for unprecedented expansion of conscious potential. The time before the moon was ending, but consciousness chose to make it a beginning. And as we stand on the threshold of another cosmic transition, we face the same opportunity that confronted the survivors of the lunar catastrophe 45 centuries ago. We can choose to see universal instability not as evidence that existence is meaningless, but as proof that reality itself is alive, dynamic, and constantly creating new possibilities for conscious beings who develop the courage to dance with infinite change rather than resist it. The ancient Egyptians knew that the sky would change again. They prepared for that change not with resignation, but with anticipation. They understood that each cosmic transition offers consciousness new opportunities to understand its place in the universe and to create forms of civilization that reflect that understanding more completely. They left us not just warnings about approaching catastrophe, but invitations to join them in the cosmic dance that transforms catastrophe into opportunity for unlimited conscious evolution. The choice is ours, but the cosmic clock they set in motion is approaching midnight. The decisions we make in the coming years will determine whether human consciousness emerges from the approaching chaos with enhanced capabilities for creating meaning within an infinite and dynamic universe, or whether we retreat into fear and miss the greatest opportunity for conscious evolution that our species has ever encountered. The whispers from those ancient stones grow louder now, echoing across the centuries, with an urgency that makes your skin crawl. Because what we've uncovered tonight isn't just history, it's prophecy. And the clock they set ticking 45 centuries ago is about to strike midnight. You feel it, don't you? That gnawing sense that something fundamental is shifting beneath our feet, that the comfortable assumptions we've built our world upon are starting to crack like ancient papyrus exposed to desert wind. The evidence we've traced through Egyptian monuments, through buried calculations and suppressed research, through the silence of academic institutions and the classified files of space agencies, all of it converges on a single, terrifying conclusion. We're not just studying ancient history, we're reading our own future. The astronomical anomalies that NASA won't discuss publicly, the gravitational perturbations that deep space monitoring systems detect but don't report, the subtle changes in lunar behavior that contradict every model of orbital mechanics we've been taught to trust. They're all following the same pattern that Egyptian astronomers documented when the moon first arrived. The same mathematical progression, the same sequence of early warning signs, the same countdown to cosmic catastrophe. But here's what makes this revelation so earth-shattering. The ancient Egyptians didn't just predict when the next cycle would begin. They calculated exactly how it would unfold, stage by stage, astronomical marker by astronomical marker, until the moment when Earth's gravitational field captures something new from the cosmic darkness. Something that will transform our world as dramatically as the moon's arrival transformed theirs. Dr. Hassan's confiscated research, leaked fragments of which have surfaced in underground academic networks, contain translations of hieroglyphic sequences that read like a countdown timer. Mathematical calculations that track the approach of what Egyptian texts called the Silver Twins, a pair of massive objects whose capture by Earth's gravity would create a double moon system capable of reshaping our planet's entire environmental framework. The implications are staggering. Tidal ranges that could reach hundreds of meters, seasonal patterns that would become completely unpredictable, magnetic field disruptions that would render electronic navigation systems useless, day lengths that would vary chaotically as competing gravitational influences fought for control of Earth's rotation. The technological civilization we've built over the past 2 centuries would collapse within months, leaving scattered survivors to rebuild from whatever fragments they could preserve. But the Egyptian records suggest this isn't just random cosmic violence. It's part of a larger pattern, a universal rhythm that conscious beings can learn to anticipate and work with creatively. The astronomical cycles they tracked weren't just about predicting catastrophe. They were about understanding the cosmic context within which consciousness evolves, the universal forces that create opportunities for awareness to transcend the limitations of any particular planetary environment. Their underground preservation complexes weren't just survival bunkers. They were transformation chambers, designed to maintain human consciousness through periods when the basic parameters of physical existence would be in flux. The psychological protocols embedded in their religious practices weren't just trauma management techniques. They were evolutionary catalysts, designed to help awareness develop capabilities that could function regardless of what changes the universe might bring. The mathematical precision of their monuments, the astronomical alignments that account for celestial mechanics across thousands of years, the preservation systems built to maintain essential knowledge through geological epochs, all of it was designed around a single revolutionary insight. Cosmic catastrophe isn't something that happens to consciousness. It's something that consciousness can learn to use as a tool for unlimited growth. This is the secret that mainstream archaeology has spent 2 centuries trying to suppress. Not just that ancient civilizations were more sophisticated than we've been taught, but that they understood principles of conscious evolution that could make cosmic catastrophe irrelevant to the development of awareness itself. They discovered that consciousness, when it develops cosmic courage, becomes capable of finding opportunity within any challenge that infinite reality might present. The evidence for this evolutionary understanding appears throughout Egyptian texts in forms so subtle that only now, as we approach our own encounter with cosmic instability, are we beginning to recognize their significance. The hieroglyphic symbols that appear repeatedly in astronomical calculations, the mathematical ratios embedded in architectural proportions, the ritual sequences that guided temple practices, all of it encodes specific techniques for maintaining conscious coherence while physical reality undergoes fundamental transformation. Dr. Patricia Williams, whose analysis of Egyptian preservation technologies revealed their impossible sophistication, has discovered what she calls consciousness protocols, embedded within the engineering specifications of underground complexes. These aren't just instructions for maintaining life support systems. They're detailed guidelines for maintaining psychological stability, creative capacity, and social cooperation, while the basic laws governing physical existence become unreliable. The protocols describe techniques for what they called cosmic meditation, practices that allow awareness to maintain clarity and purpose even when familiar reference points disappear. They outline methods for transformational learning, educational approaches that help consciousness adapt to new realities without losing essential capabilities. Most remarkably, they provide instructions for evolutionary synthesis, processes that allow communities to emerge from cosmic catastrophe with enhanced rather than diminished capacities for creating meaning and beauty. These aren't primitive rituals or mystical practices. They're sophisticated technologies of consciousness, developed through direct experience with cosmic transformation and refined across generations of practical application. The ancient Egyptians weren't just preserving their civilization through cosmic catastrophe. They were using cosmic catastrophe to evolve their civilization toward capabilities that transcended the limitations of any particular cosmic environment. This evolutionary perspective explains why Egyptian monuments were built with such impossible precision, why their mathematical systems encoded universal constants, why their preservation systems were designed to function across geological timescales. They weren't just building for their own era, or even for our era. They were building for the cosmic era, the period when human consciousness would develop the capability to work directly with the forces that shape the universe itself. The astronomical alignments that point toward Orion, the mathematical ratios that encode Earth's dimensions, the underground complexes that integrate with planetary geological systems, all of it was designed to facilitate the transition from planetary consciousness to cosmic consciousness, from awareness that depends on stable environmental conditions to awareness that can create stability within any cosmic context. The approaching cosmic instability that their calculations predicted isn't just a threat to human civilization. It's an invitation to join the cosmic dance, to develop the kind of awareness that can find creative opportunity within universal change itself. The gravitational chaos that will accompany the capture of new satellites isn't just environmental disruption. It's a catalyst for conscious evolution, a cosmic trigger that could unlock capabilities within human awareness that we've never imagined possible. But accessing this evolutionary potential requires more than just technological preparation. It requires the kind of psychological transformation that Egyptian protocols were designed to facilitate, the development of cosmic courage that allows consciousness to embrace uncertainty as a creative force rather than resist it as a threat. It requires learning to think in cosmic timescales, to plan for possibilities that extend beyond individual lifetimes, and most importantly, to maintain hope and creativity even when confronted with evidence that familiar worlds can disappear overnight. The choice facing humanity isn't whether we can survive the approaching cosmic catastrophe. The choice is whether we can use it as an opportunity to evolve beyond the limitations of planetary consciousness toward the kind of cosmic awareness that ancient Egypt achieved through their encounter with lunar transformation. We can choose to see approaching changes as threats to be resisted, or we can choose to see them as invitations to transcend the boundaries that have confined human potential for millennia. The moon hanging in our sky tonight isn't just a satellite governing tides and seasons. It's a teacher, a cosmic mentor that has been preparing human consciousness for this moment across 45 centuries of gradual influence. Every lunar cycle, every tidal rhythm, every night when silver light illuminates the darkness has been part of an extended lesson in cosmic courage, a slow preparation for the moment when consciousness would be ready to dance with forces far greater than anything planetary existence could imagine. The ancient Egyptians knew this moment would come. They built their entire civilization around preparing for it, creating preservation systems that could maintain not just human knowledge, but human potential through the transition from planetary to cosmic consciousness. They left us warnings, but more importantly, they left us invitations to join them in the greatest adventure consciousness has ever undertaken, learning to thrive within the infinite creativity of a universe that never stops changing. The cosmic clock is striking midnight. The stars are aligning exactly as Egyptian astronomers predicted they would. The gravitational anomalies that herald the next phase of cosmic instability are manifesting throughout our solar system with mathematical precision that validates every calculation preserved in stone and papyrus across the centuries. This is our moment. This is humanity's appointment with cosmic destiny. The question isn't whether we're ready. The question is whether we have the cosmic courage to step forward into the unknown and discover what consciousness becomes when it learns to dance with infinite change itself. The ancient Egyptians are waiting for us in that dance. Their monuments, their mathematics, their preservation systems, all of it was designed to ensure that when this moment arrived, human consciousness would have access to the knowledge and capabilities necessary to transform cosmic catastrophe into cosmic opportunity. The time before the moon is ending. The time of cosmic consciousness is beginning. And somewhere in the transition between what we've been and what we're becoming, human awareness is about to discover that the universe's capacity for change has always been consciousness's greatest gift, the infinite creative force that makes unlimited evolution not just possible, but inevitable. The dance is beginning. The music is the mathematical harmony of cosmic transformation itself. And the ancient Egyptians, Those master choreographers of conscious evolution have left us detailed instructions for every step. Are you ready to dance with the cosmos? Because the universe is already dancing with you, and it's time to learn the steps that transform catastrophe into the greatest opportunity consciousness has ever encountered. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. The cosmic music is already playing, and the dance of transformation waits for no one.